Welcome to another excellent Sowing Discourse episode. Today we have the great Tony Hinchliffe, a personal hero of mine. I've known Tony for several years now. Drew a picture of him as a centaur way back in 2015. Have been going to a lot of his shows, including Kill Tony over at Skankfest. I have not missed one Skankfest in the East Coast, so I'm very happy about that and hope it comes back later on. As always, don't forget to subscribe and go to our Patreon, patreon.com/11joules, where you are going to get an exquisite print from the great Giovanni Panacchetti, who is also joining us here tonight. So,
Patreon
Tony,
is break the rules now.
yes, break the rules. It's still the same link. For now, the same link works, but later on, it's probably not going to work. So anyway, Tony, thank you so much for joining us tonight. And
Indeed, good to be here.
it's great of you to be here. And we were just talking about escaping from New York and escaping from Los Angeles. You are going to be a pilot pretty soon. You're going to have your own airplane or helicopter. What exactly you're going to be up to?
I'm just working to get my pilot's license for now. It's going to be a little bit until I buy an airplane, but, you just got to get qualified first. Figure it out, learning it, having fun. It's fun up there, man. The first time I took my first class, I realized that, at least I think that the whole term getting high, like that's what I think is the root of it, man. I mean, the buzz up there, it's just absolutely incredible. It's true power, freedom. It's insanity to have control of an actual aircraft. It makes driving look like, I don't even know, skateboarding. Rollerblading, perhaps? I don't know. Rollerblading is actually sort of fun.
Well,
but you just get complete freedom, complete control. The options to be able to do things like that. Options to be able to go somewhere when you want to. Hopefully options down the road of, getting to fly from gig to gig. Give me a reason to not get too stoned and drink after shows to be able to head back home to wherever I'm living at the time. And, have the option to fly myself, real control there. So, it's a fun little hobby, something to pass the time. And it's actually not as expensive as I thought it would be at all. And I'm glad I started. I actually started towards the middle end of last year. I want to call it a hobby, but it's a pretty serious thing that I'm doing. But I started being extremely interested in having that option last year, and I'm glad that I did.
Are you scared
It's
at all?
It's not a helicopter, it's a plane.
Yeah, right. Yeah, I'm not into helicopters. That's not really my jam. I like having the option to, go really far and, really fast. And helicopters are shockingly limited and also pretty dangerous. It's a pretty weird thing to fly. If a helicopter engine or something goes wrong, you're pretty fucked. With an airplane, they're made to glide. So it's incredible how safe those things are. You have to have like 5 to 10 things in a row go wrong to have an airplane crash. So.
And you mentioned before, I remember, that you get high when you do comedy, and in a way you like this feeling that I also got when I was high of this danger of like another level of excitement, of not really knowing what's going to happen. And you think that there's a similar adrenaline rush that you get when you are up there and you're kind of attracted to that environment.
No doubt about it. Absolutely. You know what you're doing, you have control of it, you understand the physics of it, but when that first gust of 20-mile-an-hour wind hits you from a certain way and you realize, wow, even in the air, nature's a motherfucker. Not to mention clouds and, the low ceiling or the high ceiling and things like that. It's just unbelievable. Like, this most recent time that I worked with Rogan, for example, we flew private to Houston and back, and I made friends with the pilots on the way there. And actually, before we even boarded the plane, I made friends with the pilots because they were sort of just in this little lobby area, and they came right up to us, and I started talking about the aircraft that they were flying and how much power it has. And I was basically showing off my knowledge of the jet that they were going to fly us in that day. And that automatically makes them, they're used to, I think, sort of being known as nerds or whatever and not really, that respected. But I came in, sort of, I think those guys are like rock stars. I mean, what a cool fucking gig. You work for a couple hours a day flying private. You get to hang out in the city. You're getting paid a lot more money than a commercial pilot. It's a really cool job that those guys have. Anyway, they let me sit in the cockpit for takeoffs and landings, and especially landings are extremely interesting, especially flying back into the valley in Los Angeles into Van Nuys on our way back. It was a dark night. We flew after the Saturday shows, which is, an amazing privilege to get to do, to not have to wait to fly commercial the next morning. And there was a low ceiling, the lowest clouds possible is your low ceiling. And there was a low ceiling and elevation's high, and you also have to fly into the valley. So it was just very, very awesome to get to be on a whole nother level and a whole nother level of power, because I'm not used to obviously flying jets, but these guys shared every bit of information that I didn't know. I mean, there's obviously still a few things that I don't know about the jet that I was in, but all the main stuff they were showing me on, the charts and the radar and all this stuff. And boy, you come over those mountains and then you have to sort of circle in, and it was an extremely low ceiling with high elevation. So I think there was only, 1,000 or maybe 2,000 feet between the clouds and seeing the runway. And they were explaining that, you're going to see the runway pop up here out of nowhere, and we're going to have to line it up because the ILS system, the instrument landing system, isn't working at this airport tonight. So we just have a few seconds to decide whether we're going to do it or pull back up again, but we're going to do it. But, blah, 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 blah. And it's just, that's just as much of an adrenaline rush as flying the plane, is gaining all this knowledge and getting to feel that rush. I mean, you come out of you don't see a goddamn thing, and you come out of the clouds, and it's not even that the airport's below you. It's almost in front of you at that point. It's really, really close. I think it's only 800 or 1,200 feet was around the ceiling. And anyway, I'm really rambling here, but the point is that it was fucking awesome. And I couldn't even sleep even though we landed at 1:30, I didn't fall asleep that night until 5:30. Granted, probably some of it had to do with the shows, but I was actually getting sort of tired before we started our descent. It was getting to sit up there and feel that power of just barely clearing a mountaintop and then circling around clouds and seeing on the radar that you're sort of close, knowing that you're still going fucking, 180 knots and all this shit. I mean, it's a lot of fucking power, and then boom, just nailing a landing. It was just super cool for me to get to do something like that, especially I believe that was in June or July, so
something very, very Promethean about it. The god who stole the fire of the other gods gave him to human beings. There's a very interesting book written about it called Prometheus and Atlas by this guy, Jason Reza-Georgiani, where he talks about how human beings, they have this quality above all the other animals that they plan ahead and they construct all these devices in order to get us to another level of reality. And I feel it is just something within the human being that makes them take off into the skies and do all these things, or even comedy. Like, to be able to control the audience, if that's the right word for it, like you are able to do, you have such a grasp of the people that you're speaking with on stage. Like, I remember that episode with that lady who was really mad at you for doing the Helen Keller bit, and how you were able to just draw the audience to your side. And, it's something very beautiful about this kind of art form. Like, what do you think it was? Do you think it was hanging out with the kids you were from Ohio? And from not that good of a neighborhood either. Do you think there was some rough and tumble action there that kind of had you learn to be as quick-witted as you are?
Yeah, without a doubt. I mean, there's no question about that. I think that's a pretty I think if we were to do the math on it, it's a pretty common thing. Tough neighborhoods make good comedians. The the rarity of anything else. I think Brian Regan's from Vegas. I think that's sort of an off note. I think Gaffigan might be from somewhere sort of nice, but that's like it.
Well, Ari
And,
Shafir, isn't Ari from like a nice Jewish, religious
Oh,
Jewish?
he's definitely from somewhere Jewish, but I still think it's New York. I'm pretty sure it was, I don't know if it was really a suburb,
Yeah.
but
I mean, I'm
even then,
Jewish, so
I
my
think
family's very overprotective. I'd imagine Ari's parents were also kind of like that.
very much so. I think the exception to the rule is also people that really start at the Comedy Store. I think that sort of gives you the tough, oh shit, I have to be lightning quick, things that you get as a kid in a tough neighborhood, because you really realize it's absolutely sink or swim there. Either everybody's laughing at you or everybody's laughing at you there. It's just one way or the other. So you want to be the guy that people are laughing, at something that they did or said, not on the other end of that. But I mean, everybody else, Boston, New York, Youngstown, Peoria, Illinois, all these places, just hotbeds for comedians. But yeah,
I always thought it was funny how Vince McMahon's son would brag about coming from the mean streets of Greenwich.
Oh yeah.
Right. And so like when he was like, yeah, I'm from the mean streets of Greenwich, bro,
Yeah.
And like you'd have his swagger. And I always thought it was hilarious how they made themselves the heel of their own show.
Oh man, brilliant.
Even though Shane would be the one that did like actual crazy bumps and everything, which I find hilarious. He would do hardcore matches and all that.
Still does, actually. I went to.
Oh yeah, that's right. Yeah, he's doing like the Brawl for All stuff. Yeah.
Me and my buddies, we go to the Royal Rumble every year, including this year. We were in a sold out baseball stadium in late January of the year 2020, believe it or not, in Houston, Texas, of all places. And I mean, absolutely sold out baseball stadium. And that's for wrestling, not even for baseball. So the entire floor level is also filled with human beings. The end of January. And I believe Shane took a bump there. If not, it was the last Royal Rumble. And to get to see it in person, it's absolutely fucking ridiculous. The guy jumps from one end of the ring to the other, jumps off of cages, jumps off of, platforms and fucking all this stuff. It's absolutely incredible. It's really wild. That guy really... I think he realized that he has to earn the respect of the fans. Then the only way to do it is by doing something like that, because he obviously doesn't have the physical capabilities of a typical wrestler. So, he puts it out there. He probably trains like a stuntman for it and executes. It's incredible.
But now that you say that, it's almost as if there's in any performance art, but it seems like comedy and wrestling, they tend to share that sort of sense of timing and honing in an audience and really doing like pushing the envelope in some ways. But I don't know, because comedy is a different animal now, I guess you could say, with like, censorship and all of that. But still, there's that sense of like doing the next best thing, I guess you could say, right?
The censorship thing really only affects people that were sort of clean to begin with. Nobody at the Comedy Store is censored. Nobody, nobody really going hard is censored. I guess,
there is
Comedy Central's gone softer. Netflix has gone softer. These places have definitely shifted a bit. But anyway, to get back to your original point, is I agree is that, that the two things are completely dependent on an audience, both true stand-up comedy and professional wrestling. You make extreme adjustments in the moment, ahead of time, and on the fly, doing both of those things to execute properly. Going in with a script and a memorized plan that you say and do or anything the same way simply doesn't work as well as working that muscle of being able to make adjustments or like I said, thinking ahead. If you notice that they didn't pop the way that you thought they would on maybe even though I rarely do this, a political reference early on, maybe you tweak it or change it or flip it later on for that exact show, or skip over it perhaps. And the same thing in wrestling. They know when they're doing something that just so happens to really be clicking that night with that, arena, and they'll do more of it, or they'll milk it for all it's worth. They'll, just like we do with jokes, where you'll tag a joke that maybe didn't already have a tag. If the crowd's laughing long enough and hard enough, it gives you more time to think and sort of live in that moment. So you can do something there that you weren't planning on doing or have never planned on doing before. And that's also how jokes grow in stand-up. All of a sudden, boom, that moment happened. And you can add that on in another city, in another time, in another place, and have it ready to go. And then maybe another tag comes from that you never thought of before a few nights later in a different city or a different time of night, all that stuff. It's just sort of how it all grows, especially when you perform a lot every night like we used to do. But there's definitely no two things, I don't think, affected by this pandemic as deeply as stand-up comedy and pro wrestling. There's still obviously pro wrestling fans that are going to watch people in an empty or semi-empty now arena. But man, boy, were they struggling. And stand-up's just unwatchable via Zoom and via everything. In fact, I've never even watched it. I just know it's unwatchable. Everybody talks about how it looks bad and sounds bad and feels bad, but I can't even bring myself to watch it. I'm afraid I'm not going to like stand-up anymore if I see anybody doing it. I can imagine what it would sort of be like, and yikes.
They have to resurrect the laugh track now from people that have been, from the 50s.
No.
I watched one show where people were in they built a studio, and they have a wall of screens, and they have the show that I watched had 30 people in tiny Zoom boxes on screens, and the person was on stage doing stand-up. And they enjoyed it, but I watched some of it because they wanted me to eventually do it. And what a debacle. The technology just isn't there yet. There's just, you'll hear a baby crying, and everything's completely delayed, and one person's laugh takes over everybody else's, and it's just rough.
Well, in Kill
So
Tony,
would you say that you do more things on the fly than? I remember Joe Rogan saying he likes to plan things out and write jokes and have it a segment, but do you do things like, calling it in the ring, if you will?
Oh yeah. That's definitely more my style. And if, for example, and we both have, if it's a hot crowd, for example, if it's an arena, you sort of stick more to a planned thing. If someone's like, fuck you in an arena for some reason, you plow forward, and 5 seconds later there's another laugh happening and nobody remembers that it happened. Whereas with me in a theater or a comedy club, certainly, if anybody does anything stupid that I think is noticeable to the rest of the audience, I will completely abandon where I'm at and make that now part of the show. Whereas a lot of other people will still sort of stick with their game plan and hope that that person gets kicked out or yelled at by a staff member and just sort of grazes over it. A lot of people are just better at jokes. And that's good. There's no wrong way as long as the audience is enjoying themselves. But I've always had a lot of fun with, and I think that people that buy a ticket to see me hope that maybe something like that will happen, that maybe someone will get too drunk and say the wrong thing because maybe they saw on a video or something before, or even been to a live show before where maybe it's happened, or someone gets up at the wrong time, or someone trips or spills a drink, or all these things. I think they sort of know, like, uh-oh, like, and you sort of hear a noise when it happens. Whereas I think if that happens with other people, they'll feel bad if someone trips, or they'll be like, oh God, who's this asshole, about a heckler. Whereas with me, it's sort of like, ooh, here we go. Might get more than our money's worth tonight.
We actually have somebody else who was in one of your shows. So Vincent, who's joining us here, the red dog on the side here, he's been to, I think, was it your Houston show?
Yeah, it was the Houston show in January.
Oh, can you speak up a little bit? You're a little bit further away.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yeah, it was a Houston show back in January where the power went out.
Oh yeah, on an episode of Kill Tony at the secret group.
Yes.
Yeah, that's a perfect fucking example right there. And I think you could probably admit with me that that gave it its own flavor, and that the fans of that show that have seen up until that point maybe 415 episodes or something crazy like that at that point in our history realized that they were part of something special, right? It felt cool in there.
Yeah, I mean, like, it was my first time ever, like, being a part of something like that. Also, like, I'd never really been to a stand-up comedy show prior to that. But it was, the reactions were such that, like, it was totally unprecedented. Like, it was like the coolest, like, I guess, like, in a way they thought it was like a quirky little feature of the show, and it just felt like I don't know, like a little haven in and of itself, I guess. And it was cute. Like, I remember there's the dude with the speech impediment. I don't know if you remember, but there's this guy, and he had a really bad speech impediment, and there's something
Wait, Josh
tried to
Martin?
pronounce.
No, it wasn't.
It was just this random, like, stand-up kid. He tried to pronounce the name of some liquor. I forgot what it was, and someone, it might have been you. You're like, you mean Crown Royal or something?
Yeah, I don't remember that specifically, but that's see, Kill Tony and stand up are definitely two different things. And Kill Tony is basically a showcase of on the fly stuff. I mean, that show's completely improvised, 100%. We don't know who's going to get pulled out of that bucket. We don't know what they're going to talk about. I don't know what the band's going to be or do, or what jokes they're going to make. I don't know what Red Band's going to do with sound effects. I don't know how anything's going to go. And also, it's riskier production-wise than stand-up, because stand-up really just needs a microphone, a speaker, and a light, whereas there's 7 microphone plugins for that podcast. There's a recording, there's a video camera, there's all these little tiny things that should all work and be totally fine, but so many things can go wrong. And that's sort of like, you learn about that in aviation as well, is that they don't add a lot of things that are unnecessary to airplanes, because those things break and they can take other things down with them and take power away from things and all these things. And anyway, yeah, but that was fun in Houston when the power went out. We've done it 1,000 times. We had the audience put the flashlights on their phones onto the stage. We just kept going. I think we were just speaking loudly, right, Vincent? Because the microphones were out too, right?
Yeah. No, yeah, everything was out.
So I just started projecting, using extra energy, and we just kept going. We just kept making jokes, and again, what the fuck else are you gonna do? What are you gonna do? Be a diva and wait it out and let the energy in the room die? Or you can make it something, really special that the people certainly will remember forever.
That is what a diva would do.
Is what a what?
That is what a diva would do.
Right.
Just be like, I'm just gonna wait. And
then you have to rebuild momentum and energy, and it's just like, and in comedy, that's just not fun. It's just not easy. You want to be able to keep the waves going that you've already created. It's very easy for someone to go from laughing a lot to not laughing a lot. Very, very easy.
Yeah. Did you learn from comedy? Because with wrestling, you're kind of making the adrenaline vicarious, right? And even you're providing a guilt-free Schadenfreude at times, because there's the circus element. With comedy, though, you're often making people uncomfortable and then immediately providing relief, right? And so do you find that, is it like a instinctual thing for you, or do you sometimes even find yourself with like a mathematician's mindset of order of operations? How do I prime the audience so I can almost rig their reactions to me?
You know, it mostly all happens on stage. That type of figuring it out. It doesn't really happen in a writer's room or in my office or in bed or while driving. Like, I'll think of ideas to talk about on stage while doing those things, but the execution of it, which is absolutely critical when making them go ooh, ah, or oh, and then turning it into laughter, that all comes from performing a lot, 2 to 3 times a night in Los Angeles at least. And you know, long sets on the road, long 2-hour long stand-up sets usually a night, or a Kill Tony, and then or a stand-up set and then a Kill Tony, you know, just working that muscle. And again, Kill Tony doesn't really feature that much of the controlled oohs and ahs. Like, it either happens or it doesn't. Some episodes have more of that, some episodes have none of that. But with my stand-up, there's certainly a lot of, oh shit, here we go. Like, I'll bring up a topic before making jokes about it, because again, I like to think that people that came to see me are hoping that maybe I'll cover this controversial topic, you know, whether it be, you know, someone that did something, or you know, something that just happened in the news that maybe they don't even think I'm going to cover yet because it just happened that week or whatever. Instead of using it as a punchline, I like to use those dark trips as setups and something else as a punchline, if that makes sense.
Well, now you quickly introduced the Kamala Harris election. That must have been very sudden, because I think it just happened, and you just released the poster for the new Kill Tony that I posted in the chat over there. So with that, you wrote, defund the police or have them be your VP candidate. Wait, what is the hip virtue signaling thing to say this week? These are the times of true buffoonery. And what I love the most is a comment that you got as a response to that, which was, I thought you goobers, this is from Oolong for the ride, I thought you goobers went back into your hole. Trump has been a laughingstock from day one. Now that he's putting out the worst numbers of any president at any point in human history, what hip virtue signaling do you have left? So I appreciate that kind of
yeah, you know, I like to be on the you know, I just cannot, the things that drive me crazy, my pet peeves are so much different than other people's. It's probably cost me a lot in my career, but you know, I just can't do the, oh, I care so much about, you know, like we all should, and I think we all do. I think the extreme majority of people are good people, and that this pandering and pretending like you have to, oh, I'm so happy about this female vice president, oh, the advances that we've made in our society, where it's like, you know, if you do any research, it's absolutely shocking what that lady has done. Like, again, it's just a bad, and I'm never really that political. Usually my posters and promos for my show can be political and sort of controversial, but very rarely do I post any dialogue like that. And but it's just because I had seen it when I scanned through my social media followings earlier, and my graphics guy sent me that saying, you know, if you post this today. It'll probably get more action than it will later in the week or early next week. And I thought to myself, fuck it. But when I posted it, I draft these things in my head for a second before launching them. And I thought to myself, like, defund the police. And what was another one? Oh, one Kamala dies, and another, because the pro wrestler Kamala died yesterday.
Yeah,
a very
Kamala,
famous, a legendary pro wrestler passed away named Kamala. And the crazy thing is, and this was yesterday, what are the odds of this? The crazy thing is, I saw someone post on Twitter or whatever, RIP Kamala, with a picture of Kamala. So I immediately do what we all do, and I Google pro wrestler Kamala. And the first 10 things that pop up are about Kamala Harris. And I realized right then and there, like, oh my God, they have the same name. What are the odds of that? I sort of never realized that, and blah, 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 blah. And I honestly didn't think Biden was even going to pick Kamala Harris, because she absolutely embarrassed him in their, whatever they call it, Democratic debates. And anyway.
People have a short memory.
Right, exactly. You ain't lying. Especially
or he's not making his own decisions.
Right. They're just absolutely doofing this up, which they're famous for doing in the past. This is, again, I'm never that political, and I'm sure you guys probably don't want to go down this road anyway, but they did this 4 years ago. They doofed it up. Instead of going with their vice president, who is coming fresh off of 8 years of being the vice president, they decided that they wanted to have the first female president, and it just fucking backfired, because it turns out that she has a horrible reputation in 1,000 different ways with the people that are paying attention. Sure, I want a woman president for America. That'd be fucking awesome to have a fucking bad bitch as our boss-ass president. That'd
a girl boss president, yeah.
That would be awesome, man. But maybe, just maybe, maybe it's just not time just yet. But you have to find the right candidate to do that. You can't just shoehorn it. And anyway, them doing that's probably most likely going to cost them this one. I mean, and if there was no pandemic, it certainly would. Unfortunately, for the good guys, pre-pandemic, the economy was absolutely undeniably booming, whether it was because of the president or not, and unemployment for everyone, including Black people, was at the lowest that it's ever been in history. And these are just statistics that are completely impossible to argue. You can rationalize perhaps that it was because of Obama or that it was because of whatever, and look, there's a lot of bad stuff that happens on both sides. But the point is it's just shocking to me that this is happening. They're going to pick it apart. I don't know if you guys saw Trump's post already, but it's absolutely hilarious. This video that he put out. I watched it twice. Both times, the part that's supposed to be funny was absolutely hilarious. There's just a part where there's this voiceover, that, the Democrats didn't pick this person, or the Democrats were smart enough to not do that, but Joe Biden didn't, because Joe Biden is not smart. It's just like, you have to really hear it. It's just the way they do it. It's so funny. I mean, and that type of hilarious savagery is exactly how Trump got in this position in the first place. Everybody forgets what he did to those people in the debates, including the Republicans. I mean, he absolutely demolished everybody. He was funny. He was in the moment. He was doing the things that we were talking about earlier. And that is from, without a doubt, 30 perhaps plus years of fucking being on television experience. That isn't
Wrestling.
Something that you just, a WWE Hall of Famer. Could it be coincidence? No fucking way.
And by the way,
he fights a lot uglier. Sorry, I was just saying he fights a lot uglier than the mainstream used to want to be popular. And Trump almost looks forward to an ugly fight. Yeah. He's like, bring it. Like, let's see.
And that's exactly what
harder.
America wants. That's exactly what America wants to see, is an ugly fight. we've shown it time after time. Look how fast the UFC has grown. I mean, that's a weird analogy.
Always
but
counter punches, though. With Trump, always a counter punch, right? That's the thing. But sometimes it's like he just like goes way overkill. Like someone who like made a mild comment is suddenly having like hell rain on them, and it's like, whoa, dude, like maybe tone it down a bit.
he counter punches, but he does cute jokes up front and then counter punches hard on the back end. He coins everybody with a nickname from the tippity top. I believe it's Phony Kamala for this one. It's already out there. I mean, I saw Trump jump on the offense today faster than anything else, faster than I even saw all the extreme left doofuses that I follow out here in Hollywood going, oh my God, I teared up when I saw that we have a chance at a woman vice president. It's like, oh God, why? Why? Because she doesn't have a penis? What are we talking about? That the genitalia? What? You think I don't know. It's just all crazy to me.
Am I just supposed to jump in whenever? Did you guys already play
I want
my
to
intro
introduce
music?
you. So I don't know if you guys know each other. You probably do. This is Robbie Bernstein, Robbie the Fire Bernstein.
What's up, Tony?
How's it going? How do I know you, Robbie?
I do some work behind the scenes on your podcast, so we've interacted. Also, we've met at Gas.
Oh,
I'm at Gas Digital. Yeah,
that'll do it. Yes, indeed.
And
yes, Rob. Oh, I don't know you as Robbie. That's what threw me off.
It's all
Hi,
good.
Rob.
What's
How's
up,
it going?
man?
I
Doing
like your
good.
fucking Stone Cold Steve Austin look you're going with tonight.
That's all I got.
What's shaking out there? You guys are all in New York, huh? I'm guessing Gio and Vicente are as well.
No, Gio is in Canada. Gio's a Leaf.
I'm CT. There's something, no one's going to bring this up, but there's something so offensive in my opinion, that he picked Kamala Harris, which is Kamala Harris entered the race for, to try and be president. She polled, I think, at like 2%. She was absolutely miserable. Nobody liked her. And then Biden put out this claim, hey, listen, we're going to get a black woman vice president. And then he circled the entire country and came back with someone that we all said, no, we hate this lady. Yeah. So in other words, his big thing was like, we're going to find a qualified person who fits these specific categories. And then you couldn't find anyone but the one that we've already proclaimed we don't like this person. There's something offensive about that.
Right. Almost every decision that they make is offensive. And I mean, look, 4 years ago, I was a Bernie guy, even though I lean slightly right on a lot of issues, obviously not marijuana, abortion, and a couple other fun things. But I'm what I guess they call fiscally conservative.
Well,
it's a nightmare.
That's not Bernie Sanders.
Right, I know, but I like.
We have all the money. We're gonna give it to everybody. Nobody who doesn't have money ever won't have money.
I know, and I know, but my point with bringing up the Bernie thing was that I think he would have been, cool in some ways. Obviously, not fiscally conservative, but the main thing was that they should have just gone with him because he was the guy that the people wanted. Even the Republicans, who imagine them with Trump beating all of these guys that they've groomed for this position, at least in the end, the Republicans had the common fucking sense to go, let's go with the guy that's polling the highest instead of being shady on the polls, on their own polls, and instead of giving Jeb Bush the answers to the questions of their debates and things like that. These are all things that the Democrats did with Hillary that were absolutely crazy to be able to help her get a win. And even at least the right side is like, all right, well, I mean, this might be fucking crazy, but let's let the guy who seems like he has a chance to win have a chance. And let's just hope he's still Republican at the end of it, that we're not getting played like fools.
Well, he had to reshape the party in his image. Like, he literally tore down the establishment and was like, no, this is actually what people want. And so whatever the common knowledge was, Trump said, no, I know better than all of you. He was like, I know better than the polls. I know better than the pundits. I know better than the mainstream. And then he was right.
Well, he's executed.
That's why one of his best points is, I'm president and you're not.
He's executed virtually zero of the policies he put forward, except for liking low interest rates and big deficit spending. That's the only policy he's put forward that he's kind of,
It's
kept
very
his word
hard,
on.
very hard to accomplish a lot in the first 4 years. But my main thing with Trump is just that he's kept us out of wars that certainly the generals and also taken us away from some precarious war positions against his original general's wishes. Whatever it takes for us to not have so many fucking soldiers blown up, these kids that think they're going to pay for their college, from joining the military and going out there and losing limbs and eyeballs and their lives at times. It's been absolutely ridiculous. And they say that our reputation around the world is embarrassing because of Trump right now. Our reputation around the world is embarrassing because we've been the world police this whole time. I just rewatched that with my my buddy the other night. We were getting stoned, fucking eating pasta, and I said, let's watch Team America World Police, and I forgot how, of course, it's my favorite people, Matt and Trey, the only people that I can truly trust in comedy, well, except for like Tim Dillon and a handful of others, but I forgot how fucking correct they were with their writing. Like it's really about us. It's about us going to these different places and absolutely blowing shit up. I mean, it's a little extreme because we're firing missiles into the Louvre and the Eiffel Tower and all these things, but that's our actual reputation, is we think we're the world police. And it was fun, hillbilly bopping with George W. Bush and all these things, and Obama kept it very low key, just
and it's so fake too, though. Like the hillbilliness of George W. Bush. The guy is a WASP. Like he's from, I don't know, Connecticut. Gio, where's Bush from? You remember?
Kelly Bomport, Maine. Yeah, he's not from Texas.
Yeah, so he
That's all
faked the
just
whole.
an act.
He faked the whole thing, and I think that speaks to also this swindling that may have been going on this long of a time, which is probably why a lot of people who are Trump supporters saw him as somebody who would come in and fix a lot of this swindling. Now, whether it was done as far as trade deals go, I don't really know. I have to look deeper into what exactly occurred between America and China and what's occurring right now. But like all that little stuff, nobody wants to talk about that. They all want to talk about identity politics. They all want to talk about transgender bathrooms, because all that other stuff, in a way, that's really the actions rather than the words that would set somebody to either be a great president or a horrible president, no matter what it is that they say. So I don't know. I'm going to look at what exactly Biden and Kamala Harris are going to do if they get elected, and judge by the actions.
We're going to go to war if they get elected. Mark my words. You can remember this. You can remember
Chinese.
Where do we go
first?
first?
I'll have to learn Chinese.
You can remember this moment on this show on this day. Tony said that if Biden becomes president 6 to 9 months later, we will be in another needless war with a country we might not even know who it is right now. Might be North Korea, might be China, might be South Korea, might be Russia, might be fucking anybody. Who knows?
Those are too big. Those are too big. You got to think smaller. They want to just kick some cans. They'll go back to Afghanistan for a little bit.
Right. Yeah.
Probably Iran, if anything, but I don't think we're going to war with Iran.
No, I mean, I agree. Look, we couldn't fucking handle Vietnam, and that's a sad truth that nobody wants to acknowledge, is we lost a big upset there,
Yeah,
but I think there was some I actually think
but it's because the machine, it's vital that they have these regional conflicts in a lot of ways to just keep the American foreign policy is predicated on a few assumptions that it has to perpetuate this sort of military industrial complex, right? So they've been starved in the Trump era. So I think they have to start something like really soon, right?
Oh yeah, and those people want Trump to go to war. I mean, there's a reason why we don't know the reasons why he was firing generals left and right, but what we do know is that he fires people that don't want to go with what he wants to do. That's what we do know. And if he fired a bunch of generals at the top of his presidency and this and that, there's not a doubt that if we're not at war, then that's what he wanted to do. He wanted to not be at war. He wanted to, instead of spending trillions on the military for all brand new missiles, he's spending a lot of that money. He still spent, I think, 2.5 or whatever this year on the military. But the wild thing is, if you look into it at all, it's a lot of VA clinics, these veterans that weren't able to get their fucking medicine and things like that for a long time. All of these guys, from what I understand, are extremely well taken care of now, like they haven't been in a very long time. And it might be a cheap way for him to get votes, but it also might be a cheap way for people like us that do a little bit of digging and actually don't just read the front page of CNN's headlines without clicking on articles and asking questions. If we find out about things like that and have conversations like this, it all starts to make sense and spread not just to the veterans, but to people that give a fuck about these people, again, that just thought they were going to get to pay for college or maybe have a career, or maybe they did think that they were doing the right thing. You know, it's really fucking sad, man. I think it's going to one day be looked at sort of how we look at, I don't know, not slavery. That's a bit extreme, but like, but just, it's going to end up being, and it already is to other places, but it's going to be a very regretful con that America played for a long time. A real patriot signs up for the service and does this, and their sons do that. And it turns out that if you talk to these guys at Walter Reed Hospital that have their arms being held up in the air by wires and have half a thigh left and lost their dick and balls and an eyeball and the bottom of their jaw, they're not happy that they did that, and they don't recommend it for other people. And the things that they saw before that, their mind was already made up, but they had to stay out there and get blown up too. It's a fucking mess. It's a true mess. Anyway, we went off on a real political tangent here.
No, but there's no way
That's
out
what
of
the show's
it.
about.
Because right now, like Gio and Vincent and myself and Jules as well, we are in this circle online of people who are, very much on the underground, as far as much more 4chan than Reddit, as far as the kind of memes that we like talking about. And
absolutely.
Yes. So, and I think that there is something that people are kind of concerned about, because there are a lot of edgy people within all these circles, but at the same time, to me, it's kind of like, as sad as it is to say, compared to like the happenings of the 60s, I think this is the next happening where people are going online, they're finding out all kinds of information, they're talking with each other like we're doing right now, and that's going to turn into, I think, hopefully something very positive in the future, because never before have people been exposed to, this kind of information, or even something like Alex Jones raiding, the Bohemian Grove, having video footage of that, and having people talk about that online. Tim Dillon, though,
really
makes it...
Yeah, it's really just about information. I've never been to 4chan. I really don't know much about it. I'm guessing that it's more about gathering information than just, sort of I do glance at Reddit here and there, and it is obviously extremely, liberal and virtue signaling and this and that. Like, it's just always insane. But for example, like, one of the things that I did recently was I looked at the breakdowns on la.cdc.gov of the coronavirus. I wanted to see where and how and why it was sort of spreading, and put together my own facts from reading the actual data. And one of the things that I found out that I realized was absolutely fucking incredible was that only, and these aren't exact numbers, they're pretty close to exact though, because I just looked it up again yesterday, because I was telling my Latino friend, one of my Latino friends, about this. And I was telling him that LA is spreading mostly because of Latino people. And he's like, what? And I showed him the info, and it's literally, if you look at because they do this, they have it broken down by ethnicity, 70,000 plus.
I knew we had to get rid of the Latin people. I've been saying that since
you.
day one. I couldn't put my finger on it, but I was like, these fucking Latin people, they come here, they fuck up everything. Trump still hasn't built that fucking wall, hasn't gotten us to any wars. and they're just spreading fucking viruses all over the goddamn country. But anyways, you were going to break down the numbers, and my window's open. I'm just like facing people who are like, what the fuck is he yelling about?
70,000 plus Latino people in LA have had the coronavirus. 15,000 white people have been confirmed for the coronavirus, and 5,000 black people have been confirmed for the coronavirus. Underneath that is a number that says 70,000 undetermined as far as their ethnicity. And first of all, let's take a moment to realize how ridiculously shocking those numbers are, how heavily weighted towards Latino people they are. And then you have to factor in, well, why would 70,000 other people, and, you know, there's 500 Asian, 150 Native Americans, you know, they have it all labeled out. And the 70,000 undetermined, I'm not saying they're all, you know, undocumented Mexican people, but this is LA, and they have a lot of work here, and they do work here, and they flourish here, and that's a great thing, and I have no problem with that. But how, you know, first, my point is obviously a lot of those people are the undetermined numbers. They didn't want to give their ethnicity, perhaps, and they didn't want to give extra information during this COVID test. Why else would you not put that on?
Or all they could say was C.
Right. Okay. You son of a bitch. But my point is this, is that is very, 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 very interesting information to me. And meanwhile, nobody's talking about this. No local news is talking about this. No one's spreading this information to East Los Angeles. If you look at the cities where it's happening, it's unbelievably in Latino neighborhoods.
What's the reason for that? Just they're poorer and they're not taking it as seriously?
My theory on it is that it's just a cultural thing. They have a lot of family gatherings. They take care of their grandparents. They visit their parents
like
a
the Italians.
lot.
That's why Italy, I think, had a really big case of COVID that time.
Well, I also think Italy had no fucking idea what was going on. You know, they had it first. They really went through it. And, you know, I think that could have happened to just...
Is the death rate also higher for the Latin community? Like that you were saying that the high infection rate?
I'm not sure about the percentage-wise of that. I'm sure it is, but I'm sure it's slightly higher. I don't think it would be shockingly higher. But there's definitely been more Latino deaths than white deaths or black deaths, just based on the fact that they've had, I think, what is that? Almost 5 times the number of white people that have had it. And that's if we're only counting the 70,000 confirmed Latino, not to mention the undetermined 70,000, which would be 10 times the amount of white people that had it. Anyway, they gather a lot of family gatherings, a lot of family meals, they also are known for what? Talking fast and loud, right? Is that a racist thing to say?
No, that makes sense.
It could also be...
They're also really religious, and aren't they one of the most conservative demographics?
Yeah.
Well, the undetermined category would make sense because they're not receiving any government stimulus checks, so they were probably also whatever job sites they're on, if they're illegal, they're not getting shut down. So that would make sense why those people got more sick.
And that's another thing. I'm glad you brought that up because that's another cultural fun fact about them is they absolutely never take off sick. They absolutely work together.
They're making us look like a bunch of pussies. That's the problem. I want to continue getting my government, checks. And if they're just showcasing you can work through this, we're fucked.
Right. And I mean, they never take a day off. I don't know if you've ever...
We need lazy people. That's what we should be importing.
You show me a Carlos that takes a day off because he has a cough, and I will show you a white guy named Carlos.
Also, I think there's genetic factors as well, because especially with recent immigrants, maybe they're saying because they didn't have access to a lot of proper nutrition during like childhood and things like that. There's a lot of negative health outcomes in certain communities, right? But that's like just the technical thing. But again, even talking about it in that way is like, oh, that's, people are different. My God, that's racist, right? So
right.
Yeah.
Exactly. And you know, my point with bringing all this up is like, why the fuck are we talking about it? Why are 6 what appears to be white guys, or 4 white guys and 2 Italian?
No, Vincent is what are you, Vincent?
I'm Korean and Spanish.
Oh, you sound white.
That's why I got the picture of
Presenting.
the dead dog.
But the my point with bringing all this up is here we are talking about it. Meanwhile, the local news here isn't talking about it. It's not being covered by the national news, which loves giving dreadful information, but it's not the Latinos that they want to scare. It's not their clicks. They're not on fucking smartphones all day like we are, like doofuses reading fucking articles and clicking away. They're working and spending time with their families. So they're not sharing this information, where sharing this information could actually fucking help stop this insanity that's happened.
It's not a fun narrative for them. If that exact same group was college kids who were just partying through this, or white people who were showing up to work, then they would go, shame on these people. Look at what they're doing. They're not taking the virus seriously, but this is not something they want to call attention to.
You're exactly right. They would be very clear. 75% of Los Angeles cases are college students partying. They would that would be a big, bold headline.
And they mentioned nothing about the protests when it comes to the coronavirus at all.
No. If you're protesting, you're protected.
Yes.
There's no problem with not social distancing as long as you're advocating against, whatever they're out there doing.
America.
Well, what we were talking before in an earlier podcast about was this uprooting of cultures in America, where a village would experience some kind of economic turmoil, and then the people would move out of there, go somewhere else, and get totally disconnected to whatever their roots were. You remember, Gio, you were talking about that with Hotep Sophia. And I think that's a thing that really concerns like me personally, because like I come from a family that's very close together, yet I see people who are just like Americans who don't really give that much of a shit about their, let alone their extended family, like even their own parents, to have that much of a contact with them. So this disintegration creates this atomization of people that, like on the internet, we refer to them as bugmen. People who are isolated in their pods.
NPCs.
Yes, drinking their soy, drinking their Soylent. Like that's
eating
a bad
the bugs.
future. Yeah, eating bugs. That's a bad future. I don't want to be in that future. But I wonder if Tony, like, do you see those people as well, like out and about in Los Angeles, who have become totally disconnected from whatever culture
This is where they are. This is where they live. This is where they roam. It's absolutely unfucking believable what's happening out here. I mean, it's crazy. I've been looking at places. I have on my whiteboard in another room, a list of places where I look almost every night as potential new home bases. Just outside of Austin, Texas is looking mighty fine right now.
With Joe Rogan, right?
Yeah. Flying jets right off of a runway right out of Austin, Texas sounds pretty fucking awesome to me. Going and working with Joe, actually buying a fucking big house on a lake, perhaps. These are all real options that, until police cars were on fire at the top of my street and the bottom of my street a couple months ago, because I truly live at the epicenter of where all of that was. That park where that rally started in Los Angeles on that.
Is Rogan going to Austin?
Yes.
Because I was looking a little while back. Surprisingly to me, Dallas is like a massive media market. Like I bet if you looked at your demographics on Kill Tony, Dallas probably comes in third behind LA and New York.
There's no doubt about that. I go to Dallas more than all of those other places.
The move is you move an hour south of Dallas. There are a couple lakes there. You can get fucking giant houses for nothing. And then you're also just 2 hours from like Austin, because you got to go south of Dallas. I feel like that's the move. What is that? Infinite right there?
Infinite CBD. That's right.
Oh, yeah. They're the
sponsors,
shit.
Tony. So
you're holding it backwards.
Okay, here we go. I mean, it's black. It's hard to see. But this is Charlotte's Web over here. This particular strain. I'm a very big fan of Infinite CBD. I hope they will become.
Is that the logo?
That is the logo. I hope they'll become a sponsor of our podcast soon, if I hold it correctly, that is. So this is good. Like, I'm happy with what's going on right now, where you are able to have these shows get sponsors. My wish is that it would be totally away from any of the Silicon Valley censorship. So it would just be an intimate relationship between you, the audience, the sponsors. That's it. Then you could say whatever you want, and nobody gets their feelings hurt, and you keep going.
Right. Well, I mean, that's definitely where things are headed. People aren't buying into the bullshit anymore. I mean, the deal that Rogan made clearly puts him ahead. It makes Jimmy Fallon, Stephen Colbert, and the Jimmy Kimmel look like absolute fools working for executive producers and network execs telling them what to say and what to do. Do you mind wearing a red tie? Do you mind not making jokes about this? All of this bullshit that these guys dreamed of when they were kids, instead of looking at what's next. You know, they have bosses telling them what to do. They have hacky jokes that they have to read right down the barrel, man. They have guests that they don't give a shit about, that they have to interview about a movie that they don't give a shit about. And in between all that, they have fucking 4-minute clumps of commercials about products they don't give a shit about. And the fact that these guys are now making less than a Joe Rogan, and probably, my guess is probably a lot less than a Joe Rogan, is absolutely awesome.
That's exactly what happened to Sam Hyde, by the way, with Adult Swim. I don't know. Tony, are you aware of Sam Hyde?
No, it rings a bell.
Well, he is, how should I describe it? He is a edgy right-wing comedian, and he had this internet YouTube group called $1 Million Extreme, and they managed to get picked up by Adult Swim. It was called $1 Million Extreme World Peace, and like genuinely some of the most funny alternative comedy skit show, like basically in existence. But it wasn't Adult Swim per se. Of course, there are people within Adult Swim that had it in for him, but it was the sponsors of Adult Swim that wanted him off, because this journalist from BuzzFeed made it his mission to like accuse the show of being like neo-Nazis or whatever. And basically they were working for 10 years doing everything. It was 3 people, and they were working for 10 years doing everything for free on YouTube, and they were gaining such a large audience to actually finally achieve that dream. It's like a comedian that achieves like the Netflix comedy special, right? And it was just taken away from them in less than 1 season, because
they were they were one of the first stories where they just floated the white nationalist thing, and it stuck, and they were ruined. What's interesting about Cartoon Network? Yeah, absolutely. It didn't last very long. They just got on the internet, floated that white nationalist title. People went after Adult Swim, and they yanked it right down. But you forget, Adult Swim is owned by, I think it's TCM. It's the same company that owns CNN. So, you know, like, of course they're not floating anything that's like that far, you know, away from what they're trying to preach.
I thought it was that they voted for Trump and someone, and then they got taken down. I thought that was
a one clip that they edited where they said vote for Trump. But then they tried to accuse them of like putting swastikas in the clips. It was just ridiculous.
Like South Park or what? Like, cause like people do like Springtime for Hitler. Like the point is someone's a comedy show and a comedian, and then they have a show on Adult Swim. I think you can tell the difference between literal Hitler and someone who's trying to get under your skin or get a laugh. I mean, I think the fact that people are so uptight, it's almost artificial. It's almost
it's totally mercenary. It is artificial. Theater. I mean,
it becomes a back and forth where the more people are offended about something like that, this is, I think, why we are seeing this rise of the most offensive, spiciest jokes that you could possibly do. So, most of them aren't even funny, but people do them specifically because they know they're going to get a reaction out of it, because they see how sensitive people have become. You know, like you were saying, Tony, before about the Reddit crowd. Like, because they know that they're going to elicit that kind of reaction, that is why I think they're going to go as far extreme as they possibly can. And I don't know what the situation is with your group right now. Like, have people changed? are they still the same who are attending? Like Skankfest, as we know, is great. Like everybody's like of a similar mind there. But in general,
Well, who
like
was
the
part of
comedy
the Joe
audiences-
Rogan? Who was part of the Joe Rogan clique that got quote unquote canceled recently? Was it Joey Diaz? Where they
No.
tried to accuse?
Well, it didn't stick.
Yeah, they tried to accuse
They
him.
tried,
of
but
something,
he
yeah.
was just like, "Fuck you," and then that was the end of that. But you know,
My
some of the
theory
other-
on that is he's probably the only person that's ever been attempted to be canceled that probably increased his numbers. My guess is
Yeah.
people went to watch his podcast to find him doing more of that or more extreme things, and they ended up becoming fans because it's a fucking trap. It's a mouse trap.
But that's the thing. It's almost like his style of comedy is that very incredibly raunchy, like old school Rodney Dangerfield type stuff. That it's almost like you expect him
It's
to
also-
talk about, you know.
He went to jail for kidnapping a dude. How do you go to that guy and go, "Oh, look, he's got a past"? Do you guys know he's got a? Yeah, you fucking went to jail for kidnapping a person. It's a redemption story. He's like a good guy now. Great, yeah, he's
Ken
got a
Vella.
past.
You could still
He
find
really-
Ken Vella on Facebook.
Mark Wahlberg disfigured people in a hate crime, and on the stand was like, "Yeah, I did that," and now he's like a Christian dad.
Yeah, Rob Lowe had sex with a 16-year-old girl at the Democratic National Convention.
But
But he was so good looking, it was okay. If you're that good, young Rob Lowe, he did that 16-year-old a favor.
Elvis Presley's the king of rock. His wife was 15, right? The king of pop, Michael Jackson, definitely fucking molested kids. He's the king of pop. and the
People
king
have
of
changed on that now. It's now taboo to say that Michael Jackson
Wait.
like did it and got away with it.
Didn't he have like a dick that didn't work or like some kind of some problems down there?
It was
He
the
wasn't
drugs.
castrato. He wasn't a
Yeah.
castrato.
Yeah, it was the drugs. The castrato thing was a myth, but I mean, hey, you never know. I haven't seen his dick. I wouldn't know.
I think he just hated grown-ups. I really think Michael Jackson didn't do anything. I think he just hated grown-ups. I think he thought they were all squares and they probably made him sad. They probably saw his success and he just like felt the negative energy, and he probably just never felt that negative energy around people who hadn't been disillusioned by life yet. And I honestly think I genuinely don't think Michael Jackson molested any kids. I think he was just a super weirdo. And I think
Well, Jules, we know your record on this issue.
Oh, I saw that tweet. I saw that.
what I'm playing. Oh, my record is I'm playing the long game. I care about
Jules,
Yeah.
we're kidding. We're kidding.
longevity.
I mean,
No,
like, wait, what, you?
No, go ahead, Vince. Yeah.
I was just gonna say, I feel like we will never know enough to ever like conclusively say whether or not Michael Jackson was or was not a molester. I feel like it's all just up to like personal discretion. Like, I mean, you know, some people will look back on Michael Jackson and be like, "Oh, he's the king of pop. There's no way he did that shit." Whereas other people will be like, "Oh yeah, he was the king of pop. That's why he totally did that shit." You know? So
Yeah,
I
I
mean,
mean, Bill
yeah.
Cosby was the king of primetime TV for years. You know, none of these
the
people
Quaaludes
ever
on?
thought. None of these people ever thought that the internet or that social media was ever going to happen. This was all robot talk. This was aliens or real talk back in the days. People communicating like that, like even we are right now. Not to mention Twitter, or Instagram, and all these things. You know, we had fucking phones with wires connected to walls 30 years ago, like when these guys were doing that shit. So
Back in the good old days when you could fuck yourself a kid.
yeah.
I mean, you know, these guys are chasing dragons that we can never fathom. The feeling, I can't even imagine what
Curling up with the nice 16-year-old late at night.
was
16-year-old's not a kid, ladies and gentlemen.
Jules,
man, we're
please.
coming
All right,
back.
man.
You're welcome for having
Not again.
All right.
Not
You're
again,
welcome for having
Jules.
some guts.
The hemophobia.
Oh,
No, I'm right. I'm right. So I know I'm right.
I wonder
All
if
right,
a
man.
comedian's ever done that bit where they go up on stage and they're like, "I'm a libertarian. It's hemophilia. It's not really that."
I don't know what hebophilia. I never heard of this. What is that?
It's like this term that where you're attracted to like, what would you say, like tweens instead of like full. It's like a way of justifying like while they're teenagers, they're not like
Because they're pubescent.
yeah,
All right.
they're pubescent. That's
I say as long as you know, they're 18 once it shows up to court, you should be okay.
Yeah.
well, It's but this is a thing, right? Because there is a lot of comedy that sort of pushes, like even like that one line from Patrice O'Neill where he's talking about uh, what was it? Well, about set like harassment day. He's like, why can't we have a harassment day where you get to know, like it's a beautiful day and you get to like ask the woman like, hey, do you want to sleep with me? And it's like, well, no. He's like, oh, because I thought, it's funny, like that type of comedy of just the absurdity of it, of just taking like real like social discourse and just totally obliterating it.
But that probably already exists, like with handsome people, like Jules, for example, is an absolute Chad. We all know this. Jules, you are.
I did not kidnap someone and be Joey Diaz, though. That's for sure.
But you do have a way with women where I think that you would be able to get away with a lot more than some other people could.
I think that's a misconception from the outside, because I know people that are really handsome and more handsome than me, and they're terrible with women. I think the reality is I make feeling good contagious. I make people that lack confidence have more confidence and glow. And if you leave a room and make people feel good and they feel like your drugs just from being in the same room with you, it helps you get away with a lot.
And it's so much easier with teenagers.
And they're miserable so insecure or awkward.
Oh my God.
No one will want anything to do with you.
Rob, you've been hanging out with Louis J way too out of control.
By the way, one of my favorite parts of the last Kankfest was when Ari made that shirt that said pedophile with Louis J. Gomez's face on it. I wish I would have gotten one of those shirts.
Oh my God. That was like Alex Jones. He handed out the Bill Clinton shirts that said rape on it and rapist or whatever.
Oh, that's
and, like,
hard.
Cenk Uygur, yeah.
Oh yeah, he broke into Cenk's whole studio during that time.
Well, even like Boyd Rice did that back in the 90s. He used to wear a shirt that said like rape on it or wear swastikas or whatnot.
Wait, who's Boyd Rice?
Like, he's the noise musician, poet, artist. I guess he does a bit of comedy as well, but he is like one of the most canceled men in the world. And yeah, it's really, yeah. I'll say no more.
Well, when it comes to people like Bill Cosby or Michael Jackson, like we had recently Hotep Sophia on, who's an amazing guest, and she was talking about how Bill Cosby, he was setting like a good example, like other than all that horrible stuff, which is horrible, obviously, but as far as just like being like this father figure type of figurehead, he was setting a good example for the black community. And I think the point that she was making was that that's not the kind of person that they want representing the black community when it comes to like that like the like patriarchal fatherly quality. I don't know, that was her take. I mean, maybe there is something to that, but I don't know, because a lot of other people also during the 70s, and they probably had a lot of those same situations with women as Cosby did. I'm sure that they're all out there and they're all kind of in blackmail mode, but, you know, they have the right connections and they're secure and they get to live their life.
I'm not well read enough on like black social discourse or even just like black culture in general to make a like intelligent statement on that. But to, I guess go off of that point, you know, Dave Chappelle, he when he took that like long break from his career and the Chappelle Show, like when like the mid 2000s or so, like at the peak of his career, when he came back, like something that he's been saying repeatedly was that he wanted to focus on his family and raising them outside of Hollywood, raising them outside of like people's expectations for both him as a father and his family as like, you know, the family members of Dave Chappelle, and like having to live with that scrutiny. And I feel like, you know, it wouldn't be that far-fetched to say that perhaps there are people that have like, I don't know, more nefarious intentions with how they want to portray like the black father figure or just black families in general. Whether
I don't think any power structure turned on Bill Cosby. I think if anything, he had his run, and then the system finally turned on him when Hannibal Buress got up and he made a joke, and then it was okay for newspapers to report on it because a black guy just outed him. Prior to that, they were afraid to report on it. Apparently, it was somewhat public news, but, you know, black comic gets up, kind of outs one of their own, and then all of a sudden it's something that the newspapers could report on, and then within a year, the guy was fucking taken down. So I don't think the power structure was out for Cosby. I just don't think that's like he had too good of a run with people that apparently knew about it, and no one was reporting on it, you know, so I don't think the power structure is looking to, you know, was looking to remove a good father figure from the black community. I just don't think that's like, I don't see evidence of that.
I mean, I don't necessarily think that that was the case for Cosby either. I'm just saying, like, in general, like the idea of that being something that happens, like I wouldn't be surprised if that did
they tried
occur
to
on
make it
some
look
level.
like a guy that you could comfortably accept pudding from. They were making it easier for him to rape.
Yeah.
I don't
If
think they
anything-
want, you know, they don't want it to happen. That's for sure. They want to make money off of, you know, Cosby reruns forever. They don't want it to happen. It's not really, there's, you know, and that's a thing. It's like, I you know, for example, like when some recent, you know, news broke about some stuff about a couple comedians here in Los Angeles, I kept seeing these things pop up where it's like, oh, the whole Hollywood, you know, power structure and all this. And it's like, no, these guys are, you know, these are a couple guys that have a lot of sex with a lot of different women. And when you play that lottery, when you buy scratch off tickets every day, you're going to run into, you know, problems, serious problems. And obviously this is different than Cosby, but like I can tell you from being, you know, close to it that there is certainly no comedian fucking rape culture. There just isn't. And it's not in LA and it's not in New York. It doesn't happen. Both cities with, you know, probably, I don't know, I'm throwing out a total guess here, probably 1,000 legit comedians, probably 10,000 unlegit comedians, but we'll say 1,000 legitimate comedians in each of those cities. Each of those probably has at least 2 to 5 animalistic, successful sex addicts that do fuck a lot because they can fuck a lot. And when that happens and you get addicted to that, you're going to end up accidentally probably messaging some people or messaging back with some people that are underage or, you know, that want to take advantage of you in some way and ask for things that you're not willing to give up. You know, I don't really buy into this whole
moral panic. Is that all right?
Well, that too. I mean, I think we're almost at the end of it now. Now they're yelling about Ellen being mean. It's like, well, what is this turning into now? You can't be a fucking boss. You want a female president. You want a female vice president, but you don't want a female super mogul. Like, it's like, you know, what happened with Oprah too? Like, what happened there? What's that? Where'd that whole story go? Where'd Oprah go? Where'd the queen of daytime television go?
Well, I think
what is she hiding from?
Well, speaking of Oprah, I think people have been so exposed so much so quickly, like Tim Dillon always talks about, to all this QAnon stuff, to all the stuff having to do with secret societies, and now we had the whole Epstein Island thing with all these flight logs of people who went on the island and allegedly had sex with young girls. So people's eyes have been opened too quickly, too fast. And I think as a result of it...
Oprah eats orphans. Just give it 3 years. That story's coming out. You heard it here first.
Well, she has to replenish the adrenochrome stocks.
Yes, the adrenochrome.
So
well, this is the whole point. Like, I think
this is why my parents don't take me seriously anymore.
Yes,
because of
well,
this.
But this is new mythology.
Hold on a second. What's adrenochrome?
It's okay. It's basically well, the QAnon thing talks about it, but it was basically a big concept in a lot of conspiracy circles, like from David Icke, where the reason that the elites molest children is because the children possess a hormone in their bloodstream, adrenochrome, that allegedly gives them like almost near mythical energetic powers.
Oh my
because
god.
the children produces a pheromone.
Okay,
and,
that's enough. I don't want to
Can we manage to talk about it? Wait, hold on, Geo. I'm
and they
sorry. Can
connect
we
to the
manage?
interdimensional reptilians and
No.
But this is
stop.
exactly the kind of connection that I want to make, because Tony, this may be the first time that you've heard of things like that, but things like this are being talked about so rapidly and so much in a lot of these circles.
Yeah, but among internet weirdos.
Yes.
That's
I want there to be
Talk about
clarity,
this.
though. I want there to be, like, personally, I am
Jules is
fascinated.
dying right now.
Yes, personally, I'm
Just because I
fascinated.
can make this so approachable, and it's like, how do we say everything all at once to like just
This is what
to
I'm doing.
But
now.
that's
flag
the
us
thing-
to
but-
YouTube?
but
It's like
that's the thing,
David
it almost reminds me of-
on freaking like how about adrenochrome being referenced by Johnny Depp in Fear and Loathing in Las
Tony-
Vegas?
Tony was
How
asking,
about adrenochrome?
But it
being
almost
referenced
reminds me
in, like,
of what was it Bill Hicks that said that had that style where he was talking about the drug thing, right? But he was saying about he had this trip where he got arrested and like he had the alien DMT experience, and he's like, a cop said, "Hey, put your hands on the bumper," right? He's like, "What? Your cop car or the alien or the UFO? Where do I put my hands?" Right? So it's funny how a lot of these concepts, they get taken up in things like comedy, but yet they're sincerely believed by millions of people. And maybe at some sort of, what would you say, hyperstitional level, they almost become reality in some ways in this weird sort of.
I will say this about flight logs that I've never spoken about before, because I don't really ever cover this type of information. But a little something that that I don't know if it's just known information is that being on a flight log doesn't mean that you were on a flight with the owner of the airplane. It's a record that has to be kept for each airplane, regardless of its destination. And in the private jet world, jets are almost always, no matter how rich a person is, used by multiple companies and pilots and things like that for other gigs that aren't being used. If Epstein knows that he's staying on his island from Sunday to Saturday, it's highly doubtful that the plane even stays on his island for that time. It most likely goes to Fort Lauderdale, to go to Atlanta, to go to Fort Lauderdale, and then back again. Like, planes just don't sit around. And I don't know if this is spoken about on the
I also I don't get why, if you were going to rape kids, you would even have your name on a flight log. I feel like if you were Bill Clinton, you'd be like, just don't put me on that. Like, who's questioning that? Why would you keep it's like using your credit card for hookers. Why are you keeping a paper trail?
Oh, Clinton went, by the way. Clinton was there. That's the one.
No, I'm sure Clinton fucked
100%.
kids, but I'm saying I really
Blackmail,
don't
I
understand
think
why you'd
that's-
have a paper trail on that. I also don't get, like, you go to third world countries, pick up some hot Brazilian chicks no one knows about. You can just dispose of them later. Why are you hijacking these American kids that are easily going to be in the newspaper? I'm just saying,
Well,
I'm not raping
black-
kids.
there was
That's
a very
probably
interesting
the-
Tim Dillon episode where she had this lady on who was talking about how back in the 90s, Ivana Trump and Ghislaine Maxwell used to go around in the Upper East Side and pick out these girls who were in high school, like junior high. And one of the things they looked for was having a high grade, like that they had to be smart as well. Because also Epstein was very big in the whole transhumanism movement. With Jules and I, we've also had multiple episodes where we had people from like Gennady Stolyarov II, who's the chair of the transhumanist party. But anyway, Epstein was very big into transhumanism and science that involves, living for a long time, life extension. And there may have been something as far as, like, I even remember reading about this, doing something with these girls as far as, like, fathering a family of, like, these Epstein clones or, like, something crazy like that. So
Real Boys of Brazil stuff, yeah.
I've
You
never
can also
seen...
just get married. I mean, if you're a rich dude, just get married and have some kids. You don't have to hijack random smart New Yorkers and rape them.
And by the way, we have Chris Gessler here, who's an amazing animator. And in fact, one of his animations over here, we have Joe Rogan animated. Joe Rogan Experience animated. Tom Segura Unleashes His Rage, featuring Tom Segura, Joe Rogan, Bert Kreischer, and Justin Bieber. So you are such an amazing, brilliant, talented animator, and thank you so much for being here as well.
Thank you. Appreciate that. Yeah. No, it's fun. I'm glad I could come on. I just came from a mic actually. I didn't know if I could make it in time.
Well, I'm glad you
Open
did,
mic?
and kill Tony, Tony Hinchliffe
Yeah.
as well.
Yeah, well, I don't know him personally, but I'm definitely a fan.
Where was your mic at?
They had like this reserve club park. It was in like the back. People were playing frisbee, and then some like park benches were around. Just there's whatever you can get a spot now is like where you have to go.
Yeah, that was definitely a year ago. If someone said that they did a mic at a place where they were playing frisbee and park benches, it would have been a whole different situation. But yeah, that sounds about common now.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, and by the way, here this article, just so I'm not kidding around with you. New York Times: Jeffrey Epstein hoped to seed human race with his DNA. There we go. So this is not like a tinfoil hatter dialogue. This is from the New York.
But why doesn't he have one kid then? I mean, he's been around for a while. If he was that interested in making sure he was, leaving kids around, you'd think there'd at least be a couple legitimate kids.
Well, what about Genghis Khan? Or what about anybody who comes around and once in the blue moon and decides to do something above the call of duty? I think this is one of those examples. So, I mean, yeah, it says
Not
over
a way
here.
to put it.
Rape often, rape early.
Mr. Epstein's vision reflected his long-standing fascination with what has become known as transhumanism, the science of improving the human population through technologies like genetic engineering and artificial intelligence. So yeah. I mean, the island itself is weird. It has that, you've seen that temple artifice. So I think that people for a long time have been very fascinated by secret societies, mystery schools, as well as, whatever it is that the elites are planning. This is, I think, a part of human nature. And we may be coming to a point right now where I would want to treat it a lot more, let's say, professionally, where it wouldn't just be about maybe somebody did this, maybe somebody did that. I just want to talk about history and philosophy and mythology with a lot of leaders, like I was telling Gio earlier, with a lot of leaders in those branches, because all the information's out. It's just a matter of putting it all together and talking about it professionally, and then we'll at least know something.
Was there technology that was on there that was that they found
No, there was a dentist chair. I don't know.
Oh.
Yeah.
So they were just starting their operations.
I believe
But
so.
he funded a lot of scientists and things like that, geneticists. He gave money to a bunch of geneticists.
My guess is also that if he had that technology, a billionaire would also be able to have the technology removed from the room, and the one thing that would probably stay would be a dentist chair.
Yeah.
Good point.
It's
he had Stephen
sub-island.
Hawking. He had biologist Stephen Jay Gould, Oliver Sacks, George M. Church, molecular engineer, and MIT theoretical physicist Frank Wilczek, a Nobel laureate. So these are big people, and it kind of reminds me of Tony. Have you heard of Om Shinrikyo?
No.
It was a Japanese cult back in the 80s and 90s that were responsible for the 1994 Tokyo subway sarin gas attacks. These people, this cult, it was led by this half-blind dude who attracted all the most brilliant minds that Japan had to offer. And he was on popular talk shows, like the Oprah of its time, you could say. He was friends with the Dalai Lama. So this was someone who was a legit person, yet he also bought this war helicopter, this old Soviet helicopter that he wanted to use to bomb Tokyo with all these gas chemicals. So that's why I'm not surprised that there would be people in positions of power and influence that may want to do things that, like I said before, are above the call of duty, and this is why people are always fascinated by it, even though they may stretch things out to proportions that aren't warranted.
Yeah, I mean, I don't, like I was saying earlier, I don't believe in the conspiracy that there is a Hollywood pedophile ring or a power, whatever, shifting LA-based, thing like that. But with that said, I do believe that billionaires certainly have a lot more power than people that aren't billionaires. And, an interesting conspiracy that I have is that I found it to be extremely interesting that I was watching, and by the way, nobody really talked about that Epstein Netflix doc. Clearly, as we mentioned earlier, you guys are on 4chan. You're into this stuff. I'm not. I literally wouldn't even know how to spell it to put it in. I believe it is the number 4, right? CHAN.com. But I've never been there. It's not my world.
.org.
And I've never really been the conspiracy guy, but I know, so for guys like me that have heard about Epstein and sort of whatever, blah, 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 and this and that, it seemed like he didn't really kill himself, whatever. You know, the late, great Brody Stevens used to bring it up a lot. He used to say, wait till you hear what ends up happening to these, you know, rich people that are controlling the world. Epstein. He was the only guy that I knew that was talking about this, you know, 2 years ago, 3 years ago. In fact, quite a lot. He was speaking about this up until his suicide in February of 2019. Anyway, so I didn't even know that there was an Epstein documentary. This city is made of billboards, and they, you know, they always have them up and this and that, and new things on Netflix coming out. In fact, Netflix just bought one of the or two of the biggest billboard companies. So they really own a lot of billboards, especially, I don't know if it's like that in New York, but here in Los Angeles, tons of fucking billboards. And I found out about the Epstein documentary being out by a random tweet from Doug Stanhope that I glanced upon that said, how come I'm surprised nobody here is talking about this Epstein documentary. Anyway, I ended up watching it, and my mind was completely blown by this entire thing. Like, I mean, I really, I find that Netflix Epstein documentary to be, for me, who isn't on 4chan and doesn't know a lot of the information, to be completely groundbreaking. And I think that for normal people, had there not been a pandemic, but most importantly, I found it very strange the timing of the George Floyd incident to the release of that documentary. I think it was 5 days before or a week before the Epstein documentary release came this, you know, unbelievably compelling, shocking death / murder / manslaughter of this guy. And on the Tinfoil Hat podcast with Sam Tripoli, whose show I've never done before up until 3 weeks ago when he was doing one live in the window at the Comedy Store. I was just there hanging out with friends, and I walked in and he invited me over. So I decided I would spill my one decent, in my mind, conspiracy, which is I don't think that they killed a man on purpose, blah, 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 blah. But I definitely, you know, killed George Floyd on purpose. But I definitely think that the media was pushing it to perhaps, which, by the way, I mean, the media is owned by fucking billionaires, you know, and all of these billionaires are friends with who? Billionaires, people that you can relate to, people that you understand. Like you said, the Bohemian Grove. I know about that from some other documentary that I stumbled across or whatever. Anyway, my big point here is that I think that, you know, by controlling the media, you control so much of what people are talking about and doing. And again, I'm pretty sure it was that weekend that the Epstein documentary came out. I believe it came out on a Thursday or a Friday. And that Sunday, cars were lit on fire at the top of my street and the bottom of my street. Like, what are the odds of that? And, you know, earlier today, one of the things that I got to do when I wasn't, you know, working or whatever, was I stumbled across on the front page of Reddit the full 30-minute police footage, the body cam footage of George Floyd's full arrest from the cops.
Oh, I saw that. Yeah, he was.
From the cops getting out of the car, all the way to going in the store and then going up to George Floyd and then trying to arrest him for 20 minutes before, which is horrible, by the way, what the cop did. I mean, it's crazy. Should not have had his knee. Just as a fan of, you know, the UFC, anybody with any fucking common sense would tell you what that cop did with his knee was ridiculous, and how he held it there was ridiculous. But I found it really interesting that it was released today. None of the big places are talking about it, from what I at least found. Again, I stumbled across it on Reddit.
I haven't heard about it till now.
Right. And I watched this, and he's clearly resisting arrest for 20 minutes, freaking out. The cops are asking him, what drugs are you on? You seem like you're on drugs, buddy. Come on, pal, blah, 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 blah. It's 20 minutes before the guy that puts his knee on his neck even shows up. And he's an asshole. And what he did was horrible. And that's a bad thing, to put your fucking knee on a guy's neck. But the other cops, it tells a whole part of the story that just wasn't told. And not only is the media not covering, the mainstream media not covering it, but I find it really interesting that today's the day that Vice President or former Vice President Biden picks his running mate. And, you know, there's other news story, wildly compelling, you know, college football is basically pound for pound one of the, if not the truly biggest sport in the country, to people that aren't in New York and LA, especially. So if you take those two massive wings out, you're left with everywhere else that is the main, vein of college football. And the story yesterday was that, and today it's still that, and everybody's talking about this and that. And I had to, it's like, they clearly don't, it's not a news story to them that clearly George Floyd on drugs with COVID, all of this stuff was resisting arrest. And
they get to really direct outrage. And the best example of that was when, I'm going to pronounce the name wrong, but when that Khashoggi guy got murdered by Saudi Arabia, and it was all over the news for a little while, and there was like total outrage. Saudi Arabia is fucking starving half of Yemen, and they're responsible for that. But, you know, the news reports about this one individual, and everyone's like up in arms about Saudi Arabia because they don't report on the other stuff. Look at this George Floyd thing, 100% tragic, 100% tragic. There have been more deaths of black teenagers because of the Black Lives Matter movement. Black Lives Matter movement, like people affiliated with that have been out with guns and killed black kids. And you don't see a lot of that in the media because they just pick and choose the stories of what they want us to be outraged about. And they're really good at propagandizing the country. If you show enough things on repeat, people think, I mean, no one, you're a racist if you bring up the statistics and try and go, hey, is there an epidemic here of, you know, black people getting targeted by racist cops? Is this a one-off? Or is this a systematic or systemic, whatever fucking word you want to use, issue? That's a racist question. You're not even allowed to ask that. But fuck it, I'm ranting. Epstein, you know, I'll tell you guys what my theory on that thing is. That's been around for a while. 2-3 years ago, you always heard articles, Clinton Epstein. What finally got it into the news was there was a Freedom of Information Act that was the FBI lost, that they had to release the plea, you know, like the deal that they put together when he was arrested the last time. And when that came into the media, that's when the FBI decided, like, oh, this doesn't look good. And they just turned around and said, okay, we're investigating this guy. It's clearly bad. So government was trying to keep that under wraps, and they lost a Freedom of Information Act that they then had to go ahead and arrest him. Most of his funds comes from this guy Wexner. His wealth and resources they attribute to Victoria's Secret, but it's not that clear. There's no trading records for Epstein whatsoever in terms of him doing any stock market dealings whatsoever. I think the most likely story when it comes to Epstein is that it's Mossad CIA propaganda. Not propaganda, blackmail. And he was the guy who was making sure politicians were, you know, pro-war and keeping things cooking.
So you're saying he got his funding through a guy who runs Victoria's Secret? Like another
This guy Wexner is like a billionaire, owns Victoria's Secret and a couple other brands. As far as we can tell, Epstein, this unbelievable wealth manager, only had one client who was Wexner, who gave him the private plane, gave him that New York City house, which is the most expensive house in all of New York City. And at the same time, while he had power of attorney over Wexner on account of the fact that he was his wealth manager, there's no record of him doing any trades on Wexner's behalf. So you got to wonder, why is this guy Wexner just handing over money to Epstein? And then it looks like Wexner is like some Israel, Mossad, whatever, government, whatever. That just like seems to be the most feasible story, but who the fuck knows?
Well, same with Robert Maxwell, who's Ghislaine Maxwell's father. There's a connection there. There's a connection with him, and also Donald Barr, which is Attorney Barr's father as well. So this is why when it comes to persecution of people of that stature, I think we are going to have to wait a while until there's going to be any progress at all. Everything just seems to be so incestuous.
100%. I mean, they're probably all just like friends. All the elites are just hanging out, and they're probably
Fucking
all
kids,
equally
living the good life.
desensitized. Well, at a certain point, you gotta probably get so desensitized. I guess all the rich people, they had so much sex that it's like, what are we fucked people, we fucked animals, kids. I guess, like, you gotta. There's levels to it, so they're all. It's like high stakes gambling. If one guy gets caught, they got to fill it up. Like what Tony was saying.
Whatever happened to like
they have a bullet in the chamber for like the next big news break. They're like, oh, we got to squash this quick,
Whatever
it's
happened
totally
to like the British Empire, where they used to have these like the nobility on the side. They used to like make a new invention for like farming techniques or something, on their estate. That's how they spent their time. Whatever happened to that? It just seems like everything just seems so much corrupt now.
It's like we're living in a Desaad novel where the elites have to like find a meaning within this like incredibly perverse subversion of everything, right? Like I don't know if you've ever read like or watched the movie Sallow, but that's like quite a gripping experience. Do not research this, of course. Marquis de Sade.
No, I read Justine in college. That was one of the
God,
texts.
Justine, yeah.
I know, Tony. If you want to read an interesting book, read Justine by Marquis de Sade. I'll send
a lot
you a link to it afterwards.
But there's quite a lot of humor in those books. But people like a very disgusting dark comedy, but there is like that flair of in this incredibly perverted shit. There's almost like a humorous sensibility throughout. It's really weird and creepy. But it's there, right?
Isn't this the energy of the French Revolution? Like, think of how bloody in comparison to today. This is why, like, even though this stuff goes on in the elites, at least right now, let's face it, like, the LA riots were pretty horrible, and then the Crown Heights riots, but even the riots that have been going on right now, like, it's bad, but it's not LA riots bad. I mean, Tony, am I wrong? Like, I don't know if you were... I mean, you were in Ohio.
Old school LA riots?
Yeah, old school LA riots.
Yeah, a lot
that
of
was
people
like so many more murders and so much more violence. I don't know. It just feels like people are.
Sure. I'm really not sure. I know that there wasn't. I don't believe there was murders and things like that. But what happened to small businesses here was absolutely shocking. And
definitely.
Oh,
by the way, 63 people died in the 1992 LA riots.
Wow.
That was.
I'd be interested to know the level of damage to businesses, though, because I mean, of course, murders are horrible. It's the worst thing you can do to somebody, but taking away someone's American dream and their life's work,
I have the number right here. I'm gonna be Jamie for this show. It's $850 million worth of damage done in LA. Half of it was on Korean-owned businesses.
That sucks.
Damn.
Is that 92?
Top Koreans.
Yeah, 92.
Do they have the numbers of this most recent one?
Let's see.
I think it exceeded that because it's in multiple cities across the country, but there's not as much deaths. But in terms of businesses getting destroyed, like you have to factor in the lockdowns and everything as well. I mean, all the small businesses that got
400 million
obliterated.
400
oh
million.
Wow!
But this is, keep in mind, this is like not just in one area. This is like all over the place. While the LA riots, they were just in LA. So, I mean, I'm not trying to put a silver lining on this horrible thing that's going on right now, but the reason why I'm mentioning it is maybe people are getting more into the bread and circus mode. I mean, like, going back to 4chan for a second, they call Americans burgers. The reason they call Americans burgers is because we are overfed on this junk food, and we take oxycodone,
McDonald's.
and we're just totally disassociated with anything that links us to something that happened before. So we're like the last man over here. Nietzsche's the last man, walking around mugging, all these fancy stores. But as consumers, we're like the eternal consumer. Not so much like, I don't know. It's shameful in a way too, but it's a different kind of situation. So I don't know. I don't know what this is exactly going to lead to. I think it'll also lead to the reverse. Like, Tony, you were talking about escaping. My hope is that you are going to be surrounded with your loved ones, people that you care about, people that care about you, like a community, kind of like what Joe Rogan was talking about earlier, I remember in the show, because he wants to build a community of like-minded people that he could hang out with. And I think that's a beautiful thing. And I think the more people are seeing this atomization, the more they just want to grab onto and create some kind of a traditional mechanism, something that allow them to experience this kinship.
I mean, it's what we were used to. It's what we had up until just a few months ago. There's no doubt about it. We had it. So, we're just trying to get back to what we exactly just had. It was nuts what we were doing every night here in LA. It was an absolute fucking dream. It was what, when I started at the Comedy Store over 13 years ago, it was absolutely, I could picture it and you hoped for it, and you knew the internet was here and that it could help stand up perhaps down the road. And you sort of heard of what a podcast was. We couldn't have guessed that at the time that it would explode and boom comedy as much as it has. But we got there, So yeah, it's going to be hard to rebuild that in a different place. But we had it. We did it.
Do it.
Well, what would you say is the current zeitgeist in terms of comedy? Like, how is comedy different nowadays than, say, I don't know, even back in the early 2000s, with Dave Chappelle or whatever? Like, how is comedy different nowadays? Is it there just similar themes, right?
It's just bigger on every single level. I mean, you have to realize, Chappelle in the 2000s, yes, but Chappelle last night is one of the only people that performed a real show. And the night before that, and the night before that, and the night before that, he's doing massive shows with high-level testing in fields, with full staffs, and they're going down rivers and canoes during the day and having a blast. And, I mean, my point is that now all they have to do is say, hey, I'm doing a show here. Rogan can say, hey, I'm doing a show tonight in this theater. I mean, pre-COVID, obviously. The question's hard to answer if we're talking about during the pandemic or in.
But I mean, just the content of comedy, our modern audience is different than even 20 years ago, or what do people expect out of comedians nowadays? I guess I'm trying to ask.
I think nowadays, because the social media and the internet makes people more aware of who they might like and what they might like. I think that people sort of know what they're getting into and what they're going to see. Whitney Cummings is going to sell a lot of tickets to women. I mean, actually, she's sort of a bad example because she's got quite a range. But an Amy Schumer, for example, is going to sell tickets almost entirely to women. And Rogan's audience is most likely going to be 70% guys. And, a Louis J. Gomez is going to be 92% men. Right. Yeah. So it's, it's just different. So if we're talking about the, it's just and by the way, the sense of humor, the reason why I'm using male and females as the barometer here is because sense of humors go along with that. People know what they're getting into now.
That's the best part now. Yeah.
Whereas
everybody has their own niche that you create online.
20 years ago, they were just going off of a 5-minute Tonight Show set, for example. It's boy, I hope this guy's funny for an hour. I wonder what else he's going to talk about. And they may have been shocked to know that the person may have been dirtier than obviously the 5 minutes that they saw on the Tonight Show. And that's sort of a fun thing that is an advantage that, we don't really, that we do miss out on, is that real, wow, this is a lot crazier than I thought it was going to be. Whereas, if you go to fucking Skankfest, your expectations of the insanity that could happen are absolutely through the roof. So, to top that out, they have to, Louis J. Gomez has to throw piss on Ari Shaffir, and, people are stage diving, and Red Band breaks his knee because he was videotaping, me singing System of a Down. And
that was a great concert.
Also, from a performance side with what you're describing, this isn't always true, but sometimes it's fun to have to fight a crowd. And by fight a crowd, I mean we're like, they do not want what you're doing up there, and you're over the top, and there's some people that like you, and you really got to battle the, like, you don't want to do that every night.
That's how you turn a crowd.
Yeah, it's fun. There's a thrill to getting up and being like, oh, I got to like handle this hostile environment because they hate me and they hate what I'm saying and I'm too much for them.
Or they think they're supposed to hate you, which is
yeah. That's exactly what it is. They're just like offended because they think they're supposed to be. And like, you don't want to do every show that way, but there's definitely a thrill to like getting up and being like, I don't know how this is going to go. And like, oh shit, they don't like me. We're going to have to really dance here versus when you get up in front of your crowd, they're just like, fuck yeah. I mean, both are fun, but
the absolute
have you
worst...
guys ever bombed though? Like, what does that feel like?
Oh God, you could bomb every night.
Oh, fuck.
I don't know if Tony, I mean, you have been doing this for such a long time. I can never really imagine, like, if you were to bomb, I'd imagine that you would just tear the audience up in just like a feat of vengeance and just have a good time doing it.
The only time I imagine people bomb is when you lose your words. Like if you start choking. Like I remember one time I had an oral exam and I bombed it because I could not speak. I was so overprepared, and then suddenly I'm in front of all these people and like my throat closed up. And they pitied me. They gave me a C-, but I should have failed.
There's another subsection of comedy that I'm not a big fan of. Jules and I, we went to, or Jules wasn't there at the time, but I went to this comedy show in Brooklyn where it felt like it was a protected class of comedians that, you know, they had all their like NYU friends there that were cheering for them. But one of the most atrocious things I remember that happened there was this girl who got on stage. And no, different friends. Different friends. There was this girl who went on stage, and all she was doing were these horn sounds with her mouth right in the microphone to make like a Beyonce impression, like if Beyonce used a horn for an audition. And it was torture for the ears. Like it just made your ears hurt, so you had to close them. And I'm thinking if there's just like some kind of like, I think there is a lot of pretending to laugh, you know, for these kids. Like, I don't know if you know what I'm talking about, Tony. Like, these kids who they're not that funny at all, but they have their own friends around them, and they don't want to punch down. They always want to punch up, but the punching up is never really funny. What they end up doing, and a lot of it is all You
mean alt comedy?
Yes, I guess that's the what you would call it.
Yeah, it's fucking horrible. It's dog shit.
It was an
I don't ever have to see that anymore. I don't ever have to be around it, luckily. It's been
what do you mean, like alt comedy? What is
that like very experimental? Is that what you're describing? Like
no, not stuff? Even. It used to be more experimental. Now they're just like, you know, it's just the worst thing. It's hard to describe. It's probably what you might see if you went into like to see like hipsters in Brooklyn, but not a comedy club. Like it's like you know, it's
they're trying to be random, they're trying to be quirky, and it's just
it's like, you know,
like slam poetry in some ways.
Sort of. It's right there on the line. It's not funny. It's just not funny. That's what you need to know, is that
it's like some Janine Garofalo stuff, right?
Oh yeah, that's
the good thing about that.
She's one of the only women, though. How has she gotten hotter as she's older? Like edgy, old, thinned out Janine Garofalo is way hotter than like chunky, you know.
Well, it's because she's
Janine.
It's because she's on the second wave feminism, not the third wave feminism. That's why. They could, some of them like Paglia could still get hotter while they get older.
Yeah, you're not allowed to lose the weight in third wave.
But yeah, I know it's crazy, like how even in comedy, I think there's still like all comedy seems to be one of those cultural avenues where you know it sucks, you know it's bad, but it's propped up for almost like, I don't know, what would you say, ideological reasons? Or
well, they're the aristocrats. They're like the aristocrat children who go on stage and expect all their friends to be happy for them and to cheer for them.
It's like super niche literature that only like other MFA students read, right?
For the most part, though, it doesn't really, you know, it doesn't go that far, at least for most people. I mean, there's some people that will develop like a following and they can go along with it. Like there are some like alt comics that have gotten like Adult Swim shows in the past few years and stuff, but as long as they're doing like comedy and stuff and they're pleasing an audience, they are kind of doing a form of comedy, at least.
If the audience is legitimately pleased.
Right.
Yeah, there's some audiences they please. They have to find their audience.
Yeah, exactly. It's a small crowd, and it's not really compelling. It's literally like jokes about cereal and shit, like things that don't matter, things that don't have any. It's non-compelling comedy. It's not
almost postmodern in a way. Yeah.
It's fucking horrible is what it is. It's the worst thing you can ever imagine. And it would stand out like a sore thumb on a comedy show that would be considered a good comedy show. In fact, and I love I mean, that's a weird thing to say. I was aware of and respected Janine Garofalo like when I was like growing up and stuff. And, I believe she's very New York and I'm extremely LA. And I never even saw her perform until I had to go up after her at the Stand when I was visiting New York, which I rarely do, unless it's for Skankfest or like a one-nighter if I did, whatever. But it was for one of my couple days stays and I had to follow her at the Stand and I was absolutely fucking dumbfounded at how horrible she was. I mean, it was absolutely fucking shocking to me that someone that's been doing this so long with such a, a reputation, I would think, you know what I mean? If I was Janine Garofalo, I would be like, holy shit, I have to kill. I'm Janine Garofalo. And when they hear my name get said that they get to see me, I have all of this pressure, but it was like quite the opposite. You'll notice that a lot with these if anybody ever has a notebook, they're dog shit, things like that.
Is that necessarily true? Is it always the Notebook is dog shit though?
Well, Janine goes up there really, really loose. There's something to if you got like you're doing your act and you got the 2 new bits you're doing, which I don't work in the style, but I've seen headliners work in the style and they go, okay, here's the new thing. And they peek at the one word and then they go back to basically going, that was, but Janine's fucking working off that Notebook.
Yeah, it was bad. It was just not funny, whatever she was working on. That's what I remember. I remember it being like,
well, Joker worked from a Notebook, right? Like I'm scrolling through Twitter and I see this one clip. It's from a comment on the Patrice O'Neill video and it says Patrice would have loved the new Joker movie. So there you go.
Well, the other thing that I find in the alt comic world, and this happened 2 times, one with Jules and one without him, was that scream that I talked about, it felt almost like that girl was doing it specifically as a sadist, specifically to torture the people that were there. And Jules, you agree that with the girl that we saw, there was a similar kind of energy, or no?
Unmistakable, undeniable. The only reason she was doing that was to inflict pain on us. There was no other explanation. And it was so long. It reminded me though of like the only way to cope with it, the only real way to cope with it reminds me of one time I was on a plane, I think it was to Italy or it was to France. And I'm sitting between 2 morbidly obese people. Like they were so obese that they were spilling over the armrests into my chair so that it was physically impossible for me to be sitting in the chair without touching their bodies. And I start having an anxiety attack going, how am I going to get through a 7-hour flight with these morbidly obese people suffocating me the entire time? And then I was like, wait a second. I don't want to be miserable at all. They're actually kind of comfortable, aren't they? This is kind of cozy.
Jules, was I on the flight?
And I was like, and then I just kind of like started embrace. I was like, this is like actually kind of comfortable. I think I could fall asleep this way.
That's nice.
And then I chose to not feel negatively.
There's no,
and
dude,
that's
a bad
why
example.
I got through it.
No, that's a bad example, man, because they're actually like human pillows.
Did you wake up covered in their sweat?
It's true. It's true.
What we're talking about here is like Tony. I don't know if you ever seen a comic like that who would go on stage and just shout into the microphone, just like do a screech for
You
like,
gotta
I don't know how
once in a
long it
while.
was, Jules. Like it felt like a minute or something.
Yeah, like insane clown posse.
Where were you? Where did this happen at?
Is this New York?
Yes, this is Brooklyn. This was
Yeah, that makes sense.
Travel back in time and seen Bob Cup Goldthwait.
Oh, I wish, but no. This was
Open mic?
We know a comedy duo named Never Sad. They're a pretty good duo. I like their stuff. But they had a comedy show in Brooklyn, actually in the same place, believe it or not, as Skankfest. It was in the very same theater in Queens. So was it? No, it was in Brooklyn, the Polish neighborhood, Greenpoint. Yeah. So it was a small venue. Everybody was seated on these very uncomfortable beach chairs. So I guess they decided to, instead of having a regular...
How many people were there?
It was packed.
50?
Yeah, 50 to 70.
And they were all just sitting on these uncomfortable beach chairs, you know, because
I like the beach chairs.
I didn't like the beach chairs because of ergonomics. Like, I'm a big fan of having a straight spine. So when you have a chair that forces your spine to go into a curve, I'm not a fan of that. But anyway, they were sitting in these...
good
You have
posture.
very good posture. Lev has the
I'm trying
best
my best.
posture.
I have a
Posture's
standing
what it's all
desk.
about, man.
By the way, I don't know if you noticed, I'm actually standing this entire time. But anyway, yeah, it was about 50 people. They were in the beach chairs, and this woman was on stage screeching into the microphone in front of everybody. And I think some people, they were just so polite that they didn't even cover their ears. They didn't do anything to protect themselves. So
it was like it was a venue that they rented out to do a show.
Yes.
Right.
And they charged tickets. Yeah.
That's the problem, is that like that doesn't happen. It happens for comedians, you know, when I was starting out, where I would do absolutely any show offered to me. You know, and by starting out, I mean the first fucking, 6, 7, 8 years of me doing this. But I'm very lucky to eventually have evolved to getting to do, the main room of the Comedy Store, the original room of the Comedy Store twice in a night. So that's 3 spots. Maybe I did the Hollywood Improv that night, or, a great show at the Laugh Factory or whatever, so eventually you evolve away from that shit. Whereas before, I would, there's a place called Meltdown Comics out here, which was very alty, and a lot of like Comedy Central shows 10 years ago were coming out of there, and it was very just nerdy. It was called Nerd Melt, and things like that. Like it was just nerds evolved too. Nerds' sense of humor has got a lot better, if that makes sense, over the years. Because again, with the internet and with social media, you can find, like, again, going back to Tim Dillon, it's like, how do you fucking deny that guy's sense of humor? Or even a Joey Diaz, it's just like, you have to
ignore.
You have to have real problems with yourself to be able to go, yeah, that's not funny. You have to really be a fucking miserable fucking wretch to be like, I don't like this.
But that's the Bugman mentality. I think that's what's happening over time. People are turning into this disassociated person who would have no connection at all to, like, North Bergen, New Jersey, like that kind of lifestyle that Joey Diaz grew up around, or the Long Island lifestyle that Tim Dillon grew up around.
I think it's very easy to say that during a pandemic. I think our brains also protect ourselves and go, I don't think I like this stuff anymore. I don't think that this is my cup of tea anymore, because you can't go see it live. But like, it's like a strip club. And I'm not a strip club guy, but, I'd imagine that guys that want to go to a strip club don't want it to be fully clothed and well lit. You know what I mean? If you're going to do something like that, I think you want to sort of get down and dirty and have it be an experience that only that, it's dark, for example. Like I picture that being
blue lights,
the type of experience the comedy fans want. I don't think they want it, it's a weird analogy. I don't even know if it came out clear at all. But, you want it to feel wrong sometimes. I don't think that changes, but I think during this pandemic, first of all, sticking with that Joey Diaz example, it's like nobody said, and Joey didn't lose a fan there. that story that he told, first of all, everybody that's a Diaz guy is associated with Rogan somehow. And you can tell from the set and the clip that they used to think that it would happen, that it was from his set from fucking 11 years ago. They said 10 years ago, but I don't even think it was from 9 or 10 years ago. I'm pretty sure it was 11 or 12 years ago, because I was never even in or around that studio or whatever. Anyway, my point is that like the people that make the most noise are people that were never going to be there in the first place. There's this whole group of fucking, and by group I mean almost the majority of people that on the internet and to themselves and to their friends of, you know, other pussies will criticize something like, can you believe this fucking guy, the scum of the earth? He should be, you know, it's like these people weren't going to see a Joey Diaz show, and they weren't going to the Comedy Store. And if they were going to places like this, they would have left in a scuffle anyway. They would have stormed out of there and been, I can't believe what they said. But they also would have been buttered up, by the way, because they would have seen, you know, people that they, whose opinions that they did like, and they would have gotten them to laugh at stuff that they wouldn't have expected to laugh at. That's how real comedy works, is, you know, especially at an extremely legit comedy club, is before you even get to Joey Diaz in the, you know, he's not kicking off shows. It doesn't, he's not the opener. It's not how the batting lineup works. You know what I mean? There's a couple really solid sound comedians, one newer, super solid comedian, and then Argus Hamilton, an old school legend from 40 years ago, the record holder for most appearances on the Tonight Show with Johnny Carson. You know, not a very like mainstream famous guy, but he fucking kills for 15 minutes on that stage because he's had that spot forever. And then it's boom, 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 boom. I mean, it's absolute murder's row. So my point is like, you know, even Diaz is up in the 6, 7, you know, 8 spot on some lineups after they see Sebastian Maniscalco, who's going to touch some edge a little bit, Whitney Cummings, who's going to do exactly what I said, who's going to be much edgier than people expect, and she will bring them in the beginning of a set and suck them in, you know what I mean, and then fucking start hitting them hard. And anyway, you get my point, is that like they wouldn't even storm out on Joey Diaz. The same people that would watch that clip, they would already fall into the trap of being like, holy shit, this is crazy. I can't believe what this guy is saying. This is so much fun. The same morons that'll look at a clip on the internet.
I don't think most of them would, though. Like, I think most of them would never even go to a live comedy show. I think a lot of it is ideological subversion that has been going on in multiple industries, like video games, for example. Gio, you know about this more than I do, because I wasn't really around for Gamergate. I don't know how much you were around for that.
God.
But to make a long story short, what would you say was the subversion in Gamergate that we're currently living through right now, to give Tony an example of what may be going on here with comedy?
Well, I think what it really is what the term that sort of used to describe it later on was called replacement theory, where you basically have a small group of activists that kick up enough of a stink and pretend to be the core audience of like a piece of media, say video games or now comedy or whatnot. And so then a lot of corporations that are invested in, what would you say, replicating certain social ideologies, they listen to the small core group that really weren't fans of these products or people to begin with. And so therefore they sort of have their way, and the core fan base gets like fucked over in the long run. And I think the same process in some ways is happening to comedy, because people that really enjoy, you know, the more edgier stuff, they're not going to like go out of their way to put limits on discourse. You know what I mean? I think it's
Netflix just released a Rob Schneider special yesterday. I saw the Comedy Store post about it.
Oh my God, yeah.
I literally thought that the person that runs the Comedy Store social media account was fucking kidding. I truly believed that it was a joke.
Well, speaking of, you know, it's funny you mentioned that, because speaking of Gamergate, one of the guys that made his bones on it was Mundane Matt, and he actually is helping make this like Rob Schneider documentary about what, like, Batman or something like that. Like, he's trying to like redeem him. It's really, really an odd, obscure connection there, but yeah, it's.
Yeah. But wait, Tony, you don't know anything about Gamergate, right? Like, Gamergate is a totally like.
I still don't. I've tried to figure out Gamergate.
Gio, in very short, what is Gamergate? Just so there's a reference.
Well, it means many things to many people, but essentially it's about gamers that felt like video game journalism was corrupt, and social justice warrior came out of that, you know, the term, and it became this big cultural thing that led to a lot of like current like political discourse on the internet. But it depends who you ask, because if you ask like people like that were affected by it, they'd said it was just I don't know, misogynist gamers that hate women and minorities harassing women and some shit. But yeah, it's really, it's we live in the age of post Gamergate, so in a lot of ways.
They wanted more women in video games, right? And that's what made Milo Yiannopoulos.
Well, no, it wasn't just that. It was also like these game devs that were like using their connections with people in like the game journalist sphere to promote themselves, and then later they would use politics to promote themselves, and that was the big issue. And in some ways comedy and now wrestling, even with a lot of these cancellations, or like music, it seems that it's following the same format of there's a group of activists that sort of infiltrate these genres or communities, and then they sort of make a stink and they point out what's problematic, quote unquote, and then people get canceled, whatever that means. And it seems that we go around in this circle, and it's happening with wrestling now. If you follow a lot of what's happening with AEW, and it happened with metal, it happened with video games, and inevitably I think it's always going to happen with comedy, because it seems they're particularly focused on getting rid of, not even getting rid of, but subverting comedy as a thing, because it seems that comedy has a power to ridicule and critique and put ideas in people's minds.
Well, it's also, it's very interesting to me, because it's a position of, extreme, what do you call that?
Vulnerability?
No, it's just two sides of a thing. These people that make people laugh can also have a dark side. You know what I mean? Joker's like the greatest bad guy ever, because I'm talking about pre the Joker movie. It's like that. It's cheesy to say that now that movie's been made, but I mean, before that, I think the Joker was considered one of the most famous bad guys of all time, and I think it's because of that. I think that is what made the Cosby thing so wild, that he was, the guy that made us laugh. He was America's father. It's just so not contradictory, but there's just two conflicting sides to a comedian having a wild background or story or fucking crimes, things like that. Oh, this guy that makes people laugh, Cosby was, and not only that, but telling comedians not to use swear words, was not only raping multiple women, but drugging them to the point to where they could still be aware of what was happening and awake and getting raped. They made
it's not surprising from like any kind of moral virtue signaling busybody, like, is typically compensating. It's like they say, I saw in a spy book, I forgot which one it was, but there was a description that like an overly clean person reflects an unclean mind. And I think sometimes, when people are trying to say, hey, look, I'm a good person, I say good things, I encourage good behavior, and then somehow they're doing a mental calculus, like, this is how I balance and justify the like complete dishonesty or just like social betrayals that I commit on a daily basis.
You're absolutely right, and it
We're
is
savages.
Yeah.
it is truly only the cleaner comedians that have been canceled. Louis C.K. isn't canceled at all. This guy sells specials directly to his fans. He makes vast sums of money. He's still having a lot of fun. He was at Skankfest. He was at, he's at Chappelle's Ranch, I believe, right now, performing. Like, as we speak, right now, he's performing with Chappelle, with Sarah Silverman, with all of these people. And, he's just not canceled. Whereas almost all of the people that recently, and this also goes back to Diaz, he took that, not only did he take that and not lose a fan, but he fucking rolled with it. His tweets and posts after that were, if you don't like that, check this out, cocksuckers. And he's talking about even crazier shit than the first one.
Yeah.
But the problem, it seems, is with these, it seems to be clean comedians and comedians that don't swear and comedians that, rely on other devices other than being dirty, because it is that contradiction. Another perfect example is that rock stars have done, obviously, without any evidence or proof necessary, I think we can all agree that rock stars have done much crazier stuff than any other comedian, but we know about that. Or even rap stars, we know about this. I mean, but they're singing about it. They're talking about it. No one's shocked and appalled when Bobby Shmurda goes to jail because he was just talking about killing people with the actual gun that he used. He's rapping about shooting people with a gun. So he shot a person with a gun. That isn't a compelling story. And I think the same is
going to be hilarious in court when the prosecutor just plays the song.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's like Winger with that She Was Only 14, that song. Which, I mean, Lev, you were talking about that the other day, about why isn't that 80s like glam bands get canceled for doing 14-year-olds?
Well, there was
It's
that
like nobody
Gary Glitter
cares about
guy.
that.
You remember Gary Glitter? He got arrested in Thailand, I believe. So yeah, I mean that certainly happened.
But that's
No one
another
fucked more kids than Led Zeppelin.
There was actually a 14-year-old that did, like, in the 70s, she like went around to all those different rock stars, like Led Zeppelin, like had a turn with her, and the Rolling Stones, and
going back to Gary,
my mind. We should raise the age of consent to 21.
Well, she wrote a book about it. So
Wait, what about
that's
Gary Glitter?
Yeah, going back to Gary Glitter just proves the point that I just made, is that guy had one hit and it's nothing. There's almost no lyrics to it. It was, it's
That's
almost
the Hey song, right?
Yeah, it's like a cheesy family ball game song. It falls right into my clean comic, sort
He
of.
was able to fuck a lot of kids off of it.
No.
17-year-old kids, Robbie.
Christ.
I missed the moral of the story. I was gonna switch over to the music. I was like, I
Moral
just
of the
need one
story is
song.
that some comedians are as cool as rappers, which is why they got to hang out more.
The moral
All right.
of the story is that only clean comics, it appears, cleaner comics, even have this dark side, and cleaner seeming rock stars, it appears, have this problem. I don't know. I guess I don't really have a moral of the story. But Gary Glitter thing, he's got nothing. He's got no lyrics. He's not talking about
If
anything.
you got the word glitter in your name, you're a fucking creep off the bat.
He did grow a nice looking Ho Chi Minh beard during his time, and not Thailand, it was Vietnam, so that makes way more sense for him to grow a Ho Chi Minh style beard to fit into with the locals. But yeah, I mean, I don't think comedy is going to go through the same thing as video games did. Just to your point, Tony, that somebody like Joey Coco Diaz, he's very anti-fragile. At least while we still have people like that, people like you, for example, while we still have people like you on this planet, and I hope that you will live for as long as possible and keep giving us the laughs, that we're not going to have the same situation, because whatever they try to throw at you or a Joey or a Tim Dillon, it's not going to stick, and it's only going to empower them that much more.
We use the stage as an outlet for our insanity. It's the people you have to keep an eye on are the people that don't seem sort of fucking crazy on stage. I mean, that sounds cheesy, but we really do. the feeling of making an audience not only listen to but laugh at 3 minutes of hardcore abortion material, and laugh at mentally challenged people. And that, spoiler alert, that's not the word I use on stage. That is an outlet. It feels fucking awesome and crazy and extremely rewarding and good. And I just don't think that we're going to see a lot of canceled comedians in that range of people.
Unless they just create like a free speech zone for all the good comics, and everything else that people are going to be exposed to is going to be like that lady who's just shouting into the mic as punishment.
If that happens, Skankfest is going to be at fucking in baseball stadiums, my friend, football stadiums.
Yes, yes, it will.
Going to be like Woodstock. It's just going to tilt. There's no cancel. Yeah, you just can't. It's not. Yeah, we're going to be just fine.
You're going to always need comics. People need skeptics. That's always a part of every civilization. There's always someone that breaks things down.
Yeah.
And when they get rid of it, they'll just eat themselves.
I would have liked that screaming comic more if it seemed justified. Instead, it was like everyone was just being kind and thoughtful and giving her attention, and then suddenly she's just mistreating everyone. If it was like someone was mistreating her, and then she was suddenly like, you know what I think about this? And then she started screaming at us, I'd be like, I guess we had it coming.
She did get laughs or no?
No, it was just people were like, what do we do? I guess we deal with it.
She'll learn hopefully after screaming a couple sets. People will be like, oh, I guess that's not working.
No, I think that was the intent. Like, I don't think she was after any laughs at that point.
Oh.
She just had a chip on her shoulder, and she wanted to rage on. I think a lot of people are in this. Like when Trump won, for example, do you remember how much people were raging and crying and wailing? And I think that there is a lack of structure that a lot of people have. People haven't had that kind of structure in their lives that would give them some grounding, give them some perspective. Like you, Tony, grew up, like we were talking about before, in the pretty rough neighborhood, and I think that did give you a lot of perspective as far as, there's no reason to act like that. But some people, especially those who have a silver spoon in their mouth, like I think a lot of the people that were performing on that stage at that time, I could be wrong, but it's like they all seem to.
I don't think so. I think maybe people perceived one of the co-hosts that way, and I think the comics there might have felt like they hadn't earned their place, and that might have been where the chip on their shoulder came. I have no idea if she was a silver spoon person.
But it's like, at least it's not even money wise, it's just attitude wise. There seems to be like this upper class, whatever, like it doesn't even matter whether you have a lot of money or don't. It's more of just like the snobbery that comes with these alt rooms that I think defines it much more than actually how much you have. But we have an interesting comment from Bruce Bogtrotter, and it says that comics are going to be absorbed by the e-celeb. So I don't know, Tony, if you would agree with.
What's an e-celeb?
So like all
Jake
those.
Lev is an e-celeb.
I'm not an e-celeb, but okay, all those TikTok kids,
people who are popular on the internet,
yeah, like just jump around or like do bullshit. Like people are watching that like crazy. That's the weird thing. Like people are tuning in to these kids, just like Joey Diaz loves to say, jump up and down. That's literally all they do. They just jump up and down. They play with like Play-Doh and shit.
Yeah, but I think the comment is more referring to lolcow is taking what's referred to as lolcow,
like Chris Chan.
Yeah, like exactly.
Tony, do you know about Chris Chan?
Oh
I will send you the documentary.
Oh
I swear, you're going to become a Chris Chan aficionado.
There's too much.
I'm good friends with Christine, actually. I love Christine.
Oh my god,
that is amazing.
We gotta get her on.
Yes,
we gotta get her on this show.
I met her at MagFest over in Maryland, and I broke the medallion.
Oh my god, were you the original one that like the first one? Well, when Christine was Chris,
Not the one that was up in the
medallion.
ass.
We know what we're
Whatever.
talking about, Tony. You don't know what we're talking about. So just to make a long story short, there was this boy who lived in Virginia named Christian Weston Chandler. Who
You
felt,
really can't
who
just explain it. You can't. You just
No, I must.
better than
I
Tiger
must.
King.
Who
They
fell
have
in love.
documentaries on
Okay, he got totally absorbed into Sonic the Hedgehog. Now I don't know, Tony, if you growing up were a fan of like Sonic 1, Sonic 2, Sonic 3, and Knuckles. Like you played all that, right?
Mhm.
Yeah. But Chris took it to another level. He created a character which is a mix of Pikachu and Sonic the Hedgehog named Sonichu. He made the Sonichu medallion that he always wore. He had a sign that he advertised in the mall where he was looking for a boyfriend-free girl. He was just constantly going around the mall. This is how he wanted
he
to
made
attract...
this comic, and he
was the original simp. He was the first simp.
Well, the thing with Chris Chan is that he was the like living Truman Show in that he published everything about his life on the internet, and so there are people dedicated to archiving every little aspect of now Christina Chan's life.
There's an image of
so-
him on the side.
Yeah, it's not.
Wait, can I see him as a chick?
Yes. 1 second.
Yeah, it's
And he- and-
oh boy.
And he
Got
was
decent tits
recently.
as a dude.
And he was recently. I don't know if he was arrested,
Ooh,
but he got in.
spunky.
He
Like
got
an
in.
80s
well,
rock and roll glam girl.
Well, Chris, he got in trouble, or Christine now, he got in trouble he went into a GameStop and he was so pissed off that the new Sonic the Hedgehog cartoon had blue arms. So he went into the GameStop and he started destroying the Sonic the Hedgehog merchandise.
Like spray painting over all
yes,
the cases and stuff.
Yes, spray painting over it, and then he took out his can of mace or pepper spray, and he pepper sprayed the GameStop employee as
Well, the
she was
thing with
leaving.
Chris is that there's a whole like hundreds of different things that happened to Christine, because people would troll him at the time and like would make him do crazy things because he is a autistic person, and
Yeah.
so he would do things.
I wish you
like,
said that up front, because then I would have known not to make
Yeah,
fun.
No, but here's the thing.
That's what people would do, though. They got pleasure
They would go
in the
really
Schadenfreude.
hardcore.
Like
This is Sonichu,
people
by the way.
bonded
whole
over
term-
hating them.
And there's a whole terminology around Chris, and one of the terms is called A-logging, where you like troll someone to the point where you want to make them mad, right? So Chris would call it A-logging. So anyways, Chris would
The
do a
guy's
lot of...
autistic. Why don't you just leave him the fuck alone?
Well, I know this is the thing, right?
People are
This is-
miserable.
people are... Well,
Okay.
one example would be Chris believed in quote-unquote recycling. And this was actually a segment on the Opie and Anthony, back when they were together, Opie and Anthony, where they played the clip of Chris Chan with a can of orange Fanta drinking his own cum, and he believed in recycling and things like that. And he would release like nudes and sex tapes, and people would pretend to be women that were interested in him because he always wanted what he
What
would
the
call...
fuck are we talking about?
Yeah,
What are
I
we
know, it's
talking about?
crazy. It's like a fucking rabbit
like-
hole. It's
This is like horrible, whatever we're talking about. I
And
so-
there's
sounds
a
like
10
all comedy.
And by the way, there's a
Thank you,
10-hour
Tony.
documentary on Chris Chan. A
The
10-hour
voice of
I don't
reason.
need that.
there is that I will
The
never
voice of
watch.
reason.
You should watch it though, Tony. You should check it out. It's worth.
Yeah, that
the
was a
10
great
hours.
pitch, guys. That was
Yeah.
a great sales pitch.
No, but the point being is that it's funny how, in terms of comedy, how people they sort of on the internet have gravitated not towards... I mean, there are people who like know they're doing a bit and are unintentionally funny, like Jason Genova or whoever, but it seems that people just love tearing down what they call lol cows, meaning that people like that they can milk to get lols out of. And
People
it
like
seems like
breaking
that
innocence. They like tearing
Yeah,
down innocence.
it's this very interactive form
They
of
envy it almost.
cynical comedy.
But at the same time, they also support Chris. Like, they also buy his stuff. They also give him money. Because I think in the way
that
they
he
see...
They
squanders
started
on
feeling
stuff.
guilty. They started going, "Oh my God, we almost ruined this person's life." Like maybe.
Yeah, but Chris has done a lot of bad
Make it
shit
right.
too. I mean, that's not like, like basically ruining this one woman's life. And anyways, the point being is that it seems that we find a sick enjoyment in a lot of this, but it seems that with the internet, you have to have a level of interactivity towards like you're not like making fun of a joke anymore. You're making fun of the life of a person, and it's a totally different level of like you're ridiculing an image of someone rather than like thinking of, well, this is a real person that you're basically making fun of, a neurodivergent person. But that never factors into it, where people make up these elaborate stories to troll Chris and pretending to be women and so forth. It's like really this weird sort of thing nowadays that it's almost like it destroys the traditional model of what comedy or what satire is, because now it's like people have to attack like this like scapegoat, right? So
If
I don't know. I'm
can
being
say,
a theory
though,
style right now, so don't worry.
before we get off on Christian, when I did meet Christine, she was very like nice in person, and I could totally
Yeah,
that it was an act, because in person she's fine. And also, someone actually held a panel, like they had multiple panels at these conventions where they were actually making fun of her, and she ended up going in, and it was almost like a celebrity walking into a room, you know, of like, you know, like if Tony gets off stage and goes into the fans or something. Like it was kind of like, you know, they it wasn't much mockery as much as it was just like hanging out, and everybody was nice, and they people treated them with respect and everything, you know. It's
well,
funny
nowadays,
for
but there
good.
was a point where it got like really destructive, and yeah, it was not very nice. But
So this is one of the e-celebs that supposedly are going to replace stand-up.
this is the archetype of the
Chris
celeb,
Chan is
yes,
not
the
gonna
archetype.
Yeah, watch out.
replace
Yeah,
stand-up
watch
comedy.
out.
It's not gonna
I
happen.
don't. When I got into stand-up comedy, I didn't think I was going to be competing with, I guess, autistic trans people, and I still feel like I'm going to find a different audience. I mean, if so much of the world is interested in, I guess, trolling an autistic trans person, then God bless me for being wrong about the jokes I'm trying to write, and they can go enjoy that form of entertainment,
Trolling
and
is
I'll
a
never
big
make
part
a
of
dollar
all
doing stand-up
comedy.
comedy. God bless. Who would have predicted
I
that the
think-
world was that evil and weird?
But I think trolling and comedy always had sort of a vibe to it. Like you know, you mentioned Artie Shafir, and a lot of people they like the recent comedy, like, you know, he's a controversial dude, his attitude or whatnot. But you remember back in the day when he did the Amazing Racist skits,
Still
like
hilarious.
those were next level stuff, and you could almost never do that. Like going into the dry cleaners and like with the KKK suit and being like, "Come on, Mr. Jefferson, clean my clothes." Like I know the fact that like the fact he's Jewish would probably like, you know, help him, but the stuff that like they did back in the day, or even the stuff they would put
You're
on
talking about The Amazing Racist?
yeah, the Amazing Racist, Artie Shafir, and the stuff they would put on Adult Swim back in the day, like Wonder Shows, and like it just that stuff
Xavier.
like, oh man, yeah, well,
I
Xavier, the
love
same,
Xavier.
yeah.
These things, they come in waves. They
Mm.
absolutely come in waves, and you know, it's just stupid to pretend like, you know, that things are going to be gone. You know,
Interesting.
it definitely just absolutely. If you look at the beginning of SNL, for example, if you look at the first episode of SNL, it's more edgy than anything they've done in the past 15 years.
Yeah.
You know, so
They started out with George Carlin, didn't they? He was like the first guy on there.
yeah.
They
And
had
the
John
sketches
Belushi.
were edgy. Everything was edgier.
No, but they had that one writer from National Lampoon that wrote the really dark shit. I forget his name at the moment.
Well, they had one with John Belushi as a slave ship owner, and I remember that sketch. That was pretty. Yeah, that was
Jack or Doherty or something. I don't know.
They
But
come
yeah.
in waves. South Park's going to be back soon, and the fact that we can watch these 40 construction paper kids do the things that humans can't do and joke about is, you know.
Also, every once in a while I watch
Church.
Family Guy, and for all the policing of comedy, they make fucking cripple, cancer, like
I mean,
everything you think you
Family
can't
Guy
do,
is
Family Guy is doing every single night.
Cartoons have a different level though, because you can
Yeah, it's a
more
different-
exaggerated, and
Jules
you
is
can
I'm
go
not
just saying
fast
that's
right?
that shit is on fucking Fox
I
every
think Family
night.
Guy gives people brain damage. Like I actually have a theory. Like if I was an evil cult leader and I wanted to like give people brain damage, I have a whole media diet that I could give someone that I think would drive them insane and potentially to suicide, Michelle Carter style.
Okay, wait. I want to hear the breakdown on this. What about watching Family Guy would drive a person to suicide?
I would say I would include it in the diet. Like Family Guy alone, it's a dosing
part of the
problem,
program,
right?
it's
You
part
have
of the
one
mind
shot of
control.
vodka, you're fine. You have 20 shots of vodka, you're in trouble. And if you do that every day, you're definitely in trouble, right? So I think that is what I was trying to capture. But the Family Guy thing, I mean, did you watch the South Park episode on Family Guy? I
With
could
the
never watch
manatees?
Family Guy again after South Park did the cartoon wars where they spoofed The Simpsons and Family Guy, and you had Cartman just beside himself in like just furious that people would compare his comedy to Family Guy. And he would say Family Guy is just random jokes, like it's like Mad Libs. There's no story structure, there's no story arc, the jokes don't contribute to the specific drama in hand. It's just like drag in random thoughts, and it's for people that like love TikTok. It's I think Family Guy is the kind of show that makes you feel cultured while just making you retarded.
I would have to disagree. I not that I'm a fan, but there are just definitely a structure to it. I think that it's very it's broken up in how they will break off and do segments, but it's kind of like when you have like a comedian doing an analogy on stage or something. It's just like an act out of that, almost like how a comedian does an act out. They'll set up a premise and then they'll deliver on that act out, and they kind of set it up in that way.
Yeah,
But there is different like levels.
Yeah,
You know,
I've
like
met
American Dad
happy
has
people.
different types of humor and jokes. The way that
they
Family
have
Guy
some nice
does it
bits.
might be a bit more ADD.
By the way,
Like-
before I forget, I just wanted to say this comment from Bruce. Lev loves this story so much about the Chris Chan thing because he identifies with Chris Chan. That is true. And that is the one thing, Robbie, that I want to make really clear here. The differentiation between like the Chris Chan aficionados is not that they just love making fun of like this poor autistic trans person. What it is people get very absorbed into the story of this whole saga because they themselves, many
like
of them
worship.
are Sonic the Hedgehog fans, and they're fans of all this lore that was created over time with him and the people who he was following. And sure, there's going to be a lot of spiciness there and a lot of drama and a lot of things that some people may not like, but it's like there are these certain things that make us in a way, and make me in particular, I think, a big nerd when it comes to Sonic the Hedgehog and all those like female cartoon characters like I used to have. And I'll admit it right here, I mean, I used to have a crush on Princess Sally Acorn when I was younger, when I was watching that Saturday morning Sonic the Hedgehog series. You know, like she had that haircut like Princess Diana. But the reason why I'm open and saying this is because there are certain things that I think people identify within somebody like this weird Chris Chan guy that like a little part of them is in him, if that makes sense.
Whether Sega wants to admit it or not, Chris Chan has probably contributed to at least $100,000 worth of copies and sales or sold. Like, he's a huge part. Like he's definitely like he could be paid. He could conspiracy theory. Sega's paying Chris Chan. They're fueling him.
Probably. But Tony, do you like Family Guy?
No, the South Park, I was never that big of a fan, and that South Park episode ruined both Family Guy and The Simpsons for me. And you're both sort of right. Family Guy has a storyline and an arc per episode, but it's about bullshit. It's about, Stewie lost his pacifier or something. Whereas South Park is covering like brilliant fucking, incredible takes that literally, people haven't even thought of with their major points and their perspective. It's just a brilliant show. It's how those guys went on to win Tony Awards. These fucking guys that made a piece of poop with a Santa hat or whatever,
It's definitely brilliant work. It's just that like you can't discredit Family Guy because it's just a different form of jokes. Like it's an ADD type way to just put together random stuff, but it appeases a certain market at least.
It is. It certainly appeases a certain market, just like Chris.
Like, I'm not a fan, but
it's like I mean, there's markets for everything, but.
I think like a lot of these comedy shows, like a lot of these shows, like The Simpsons in particular, they've had to sort of contend with like the Family Guy generation, and so now The Simpsons has to almost mimic the same like very one-dimensional style of delivery that family. And people have broken this down on YouTube or wherever, but it is really telling how they have to sort of keep up with like what would you say the younger like Zoomer like total like attention span of a guppy fish sort of generation, right?
But in a way, it's also the jokes, at least the attempts, seem to harken back to Tony. Like, are you a fan of Airplane? You remember that movie?
Yeah, of course.
Like, I think there is a lack of that kind of thing, and I don't even think something like Scary Movie, even though I think it had some of the same people involved, I don't think it got to that same level as, like, Airplane, Naked Gun, like those where, like, there was, like, so many gags packed in there, but it all felt really nice and organic, and, you know, like, there's something to that artistry that I think is kind of lacking in movie comedies today, even if some may attempt to emulate it.
Oh God, yes. Everything's lacking in comedy movies today. There hasn't been a real comedy movie in absolutely fucking forever. I mean, it's complete fucking dog shit now. It's ridiculous. It's crazy. We live in the craziest fucking times. Super Troopers 2 was like the last decently funny movie that I saw, and they had to raise the money for that themselves to even make it. Like, and they were shocked that it was the #1 movie in America that weekend. I mean, it was like, what? How are you shocked? Super Troopers was funny. It was made in 2000, whatever, early 2000s or whenever it was, maybe 99, but I don't think so. I think it was 2000 or 2001.
It was 2001, I believe. Yeah.
Yeah, back when movies could still be funny. And obviously they were gonna be funny with it, and they were fucking funny with it. It's like the Jackass movies are also one of the only funny movie franchises.
Oh yeah.
To me, I mean,
but what's standing in the way? Is it a lack of creativity, or are the creative people just not allowed to do the things that they used to do?
Well, it might just also be social circles.
Like, industries don't want to take certain risks on new producers. They want something that they know is going to have a guaranteed, like we're going to spend 100 million on this, but it's going to make 200 million at least. And then back end with all the DVD releases, it's going to get all like the sales from that and everything. Like, they want safe bets,
I guess.
Well, also, it must be a demographic thing as well, because a lot of like newer comedy movies, like I'm thinking, like what's her name, like Melissa McCarthy type stuff, it's geared towards like a particular demographic of like middle class affluent women, I guess you could say. Like a lot of comedy movies nowadays, they seem to have that particular sort of flair to it.
They should just combine that with the murder mystery, because a lot of women are into that.
Yeah, or like Hallmark movies, I guess. But it's just, yeah, you're right, it seems comedy movie as a genre is sort of almost non-existent now, because I think everything else, they sort of oversaturated it with all of those, like, what would you call that genre of movies of like where they're trying to mimic a Scream? Like, you had like
the parody movies, like Scary Movie and stuff.
Yeah, like, disaster movie, this movie, that movie, like, where it's sort of like a spoof mock thing. It seems like that's sort of dead now, that trying to mock Scream, where it's like, these different types of
well, that was like Airplane. Airplane was the first one because it mocked the disaster movie, and what they ended up doing actually was they like took the entire script line for line of a very famous movie during the 50s or 40s, and they used that. And by the way, I don't think it was.
Hey guys,
go ahead.
I gotta cut out. Thanks for having me. I got another show to call into.
Thank you so much,
Rob.
Rob.
Great. Thanks, guys.
And I also want to say, Tony, I really appreciate you sticking with us this entire time.
I have like 5 more minutes.
Yes. So this is amazing. Thank you so much.
With that said, I don't think that it was parodies that destroyed comedy movies as much as this whole idea that there's only they stopped a rotation of people moving up. It used to be that new people would replace the old people, and then at some point they made a decision that like Seth Rogen or Will Ferrell was like the last person that was allowed in, or people from those movies, both of those, sort of genres, your Paul Rudds, your James Francos, your both of those Seth Rogen, Apatow, worlds. And Will Ferrell.
There's room for people to break out anymore?
Correct. And I think they're shoehorning women and more diversity, and it's not completely clicking with the with the
mainstream.
Establishment.
Like the
it's
Ghostbusters.
Yeah, I think the industry has no problem with it. I think they look good making Bridesmaids and Ghostbusters with only women, and 5 movies a year with Melissa McCarthy playing a fucking undercover cop.
Yeah, no, when they fail though, and then they're like, "Oh, we got to take a chance again." That's when I feel like they give room for someone else to come in, though, right? Isn't that evens up room?
They get room for another Melissa McCarthy movie. I'm sure there's another one. I mean, they keep doing the same thing over and over again, and over and over and over and over and over again. There's no
So maybe self-funded projects might be the only way of the future then to break in.
Yeah, that's exactly what I think. I think that like for example, Pete Davidson, one could argue, is the new one, and I think that if to be a lot of people, for example, he was on a couple of the roasts that I wrote on, and a lot of the jokes about him are that he's racially ambiguous while being a white guy. And I think that there's a reason why Pete Davidson is their pick to be the new white guy. And it's not a coincidence that a lot of the jokes about him are that people think he's maybe black or Jewish or this or that or all. You know what I mean? Like he plays to, I think they want to play to people. I think that the big industry thinks they could get in trouble by having a movie that just bombs with a new white guy, for example. Is that weird to say? I mean, it just out of all the different people, the rotation ended at some point. In fact, if you look at the late night shows, and for some reason they'd rather go with British guys than the next in line here in America. It's a very bizarre thing. And
people see this though. I feel like now it's kind of gotten like there's enough light that's been shed on it where people are realizing, which I think is why people flock to things like Adult Swim, where they give people those chances. Like they don't always work out, but there's a lot of people like some guy I know from Newgrounds, Zach Hadel and Michael Kuzak recently pitched a pilot that might get on to Adult Swim, but they're totally self-funded like Newgrounds guys that are just making their own thing, and they've pitched it to studios, but nobody would take stuff before. So then they're just like, well, we'll make something and then just show it to them. And then at least there's an outlet that will take that. I don't know if there's that many outlets out there that will take those chances though. At least not yet.
No, a lot of it is like that Stone Toss comic. You know the one I'm talking about, Geo, right? With the burgers.
Yeah, Stone Toss.
Yes. So can you describe it?
Well, it's basic. Oh, you mean the Woke Capital one?
Yes.
Yeah, it's like an executive meeting, and it's an advertising agency, and they're like, we have to sell this burger, and the panel on the whiteboard is like what was it, like 2 like gay guys kissing, and they're like, and the executives are like, how is this going to sell burgers? And the advertiser's like, what do you mean burgers? Like in other words, like it's about the social message. It's no longer about like just the product or anything like that, right?
And I don't know how much of that is just, again, people being scared and wanting to err on the side of social justice. And if we can add something like that into the product, then we will, and we're not going to get in trouble. If we don't, we may get in trouble because people are going to be like, why aren't you promoting message A, B, and C? And I think that's the situation a lot of people find themselves in. Yeah, that's the comic. So
I feel like eventually talent has to rise to the top though, because you can only for so long sustain on what the media and whatever's, whoever's pushing the main image. Like eventually, if someone makes something that good, you have to break out eventually. You have to.
There's going to be another outlet that eventually peeks its head up out of nowhere, YouTube was once YouTube without Google. Reddit was once not owned by corporations, right? Netflix used to have a lot more balls before they had to take, billions of dollars of investments and things like that to pay their overhead or whatever. Everything has its course, and it's not that, it's just natural. Something's going to give here. There needs to be somewhere other than, for example, YouTube for an edgy comedian to release a 1-hour special now that Rob Schneider's on Netflix. I mean, you know,
I truly believe Newgrounds has that spot though. 'Cause Newgrounds since day one, what is it, 1998 they came out or something like
Yeah,
that. It's been
crazy.
25 years now. They've totally been independent. The motto is everything by everyone, and
what's that?
Newgrounds is art, animation, audio stuff. It's totally like independent, self-run stuff. There's been a ton of creators to come out of it in the past few years, but they've had a large audience building for years. It's like YouTube, but mostly just art stuff and not like filler, like video game stuff or makeup tutorials and stuff. Yeah, the logo over here.
Yeah. The creators there, I think that they have a really good sense of community and compassion for creators that are starting out as well. And that's something that I think is lacking in a lot more of these, aristocratic, types in a lot of these established industries where it's, I think, and I could be wrong about this, but Tony, like, since you are in Hollywood, you do notice that there is sort of like a pecking order, and some people, not all people, would treat each other based on those kind of credentials, as opposed to just having more of like this artistic community that's around them. I don't think the comedy situation is like that, by the way. Like, I think like the Comedy Store and the people who you hang out with, that's as close to Newgrounds as I could imagine things would
probably
get in that kind of world. But as far as like all the other stuff that's around it, I imagine it's a lot tougher.
With that said, speaking of Newgrounds, I'm going to go find some right now. Thank you guys for having me on the show. This was a lot of fun. I stayed a lot longer than my my scheduled time because you guys.
Thank you so much, Tony. You're amazing. I love your comedy. I can't wait to go to one of your next shows whenever you're allowed back in a theater or an auditorium or anywhere
in Jersey.
Thank you. Thank you so much. You guys are so smart. I feel like you guys should get to work on the vaccine.
Yes. Yeah, we'll get right to it. Thanks.